Chapter 477. The Emperor Hound and Lien Wanli moved to the side. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at the sky. Looking at the endless cosmic rays, he knew there was no turning back this time. He had to fight to the death. Yi Xian was about to summon the pagoda when a woman suddenly appeared above Yi Xian. The woman wore green clothes and had a small cloth bag at her waist. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this woman. She was the painter that he'd met when he'd first entered the heaven domain. Why is she here? Yi Xian's mind was filled with questions. In the air, Master Painter glanced at the horizon. A moment later, she took out a black inkstone from her small cloth bag. Then, the black inkstone rushed into the sky. In an instant, the entire horizon was covered in darkness. The darkness was like ink that covered the entire sky. At the same time, the black ink blocked all the cosmic rays. The great sovereign's gaze fell on the painter, and his eyes were solemn. The 6 divine wizards also looked at the painter. The painter looked up at Wei Yangtian, who was trapped in the sky, and smiled, "I'm late." She was about to attack when the great sovereign suddenly appeared in front of her. The great sovereign looked at the painter. "I presume your excellency is that painter." The painter smiled, "That's me." The great sovereign smiled, "Please enlighten me." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a speck of light silently condensed in it. It didn't take long for the light to grow larger and larger, until it engulfed him and the painter. On the other side, Wei Yangtian's hands suddenly shook. Rumble. The sky shook violently, and the cosmic rays began to tremble violently. The 6 divine wizards' expressions changed, and they hurriedly formed hand seals and started chanting madly. It didn't take long for the space around Wei Yangtian to tremble violently, and strands of mysterious energy converged towards Wei Yangtian. Meanwhile, the hunchbacked old man in front of Wei Yangtian suddenly pressed his hands down. Rumble. A rumbling sound suddenly rang out in the sky, and then space began to crack inch by inch. The 6 divine wizards exchanged glances. In the next moment, they gathered together and formed triangular hand seals while chanting something. Soon, a huge golden sigil appeared above endless sky and the hunchbacked old man. Rumble. Beams of golden light shot out from the seal, and soon, the space around unending sky and the hunchback old man returned to normal. At the same time, the beams of golden light continued to shoot towards them. Wei Yangtian raised his palm to block, and the golden radiance was blocked. However, the golden rays seemed to be endless as they shot towards endless sky and the hunchbacked old man in a frenzy. Right at this moment, the hunchbacked old man who stood not too far away from Midnight Heaven suddenly said, "Palace Master Midnight, I'll hold them back. You deal with this formation." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly appeared in front of endless heaven. In the next moment, he suddenly pressed his palms together and pushed them upwards. Boom! The heavens and the earth shook violently as a powerful force forcefully blocked all the beams of golden radiance. Wei Yangtian didn't hesitate at all. Her figure shook, and then she vanished. In the next moment, numerous explosions resounded incessantly from within the formation. The expressions of the 6 divine wizards changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and one of them turned to look at the nearby expanse of white light. "They're coming out." Rumble. The white light exploded into pieces, and it didn't take long for it to disperse completely to reveal a figure that had retreated 300 m away. This person. It was the Great Exalt. The Great Exalt stared fixedly at the painter. "You're stronger than I imagined." The painter grinned. "You're not as weak as I imagined." The Great Exalt spoke softly. "Is that so?" As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and 3 teleportation formations suddenly appeared on his right. In next to no time, the space around them started to tremble violently, and it didn't take long for 2 old men to walk out from the teleportation formations. Behind these 2 old men were almost 100 people. These 100 people all held long spears in their hands and wore black iron armor. Their bodies exuded a powerful aura. In addition, countless monster beasts flew out from the spatial passageway. These monster beasts were huge, and their auras were extremely powerful. An army. This was an army invasion. Seeing this scene, the painter frowned. Which star field are you from? The great exalt smiled. Sky River Star Field. Hearing this, the painter's frown deepened. Sky River Star Field is very far from here. Why are you here? Saying this, she suddenly looked down at Yi Xian. For him? The great exalt smiled. Not exactly. The painter said softly, I see. You must have learned that the Moke clan is at war with my never-ending star field, so you came here to reap the benefits. The great exalt smiled. Esteemed painter, with your strength, where can't you go? Why stay here and fight for the never-ending star field, isn't that right? The painter smiled. No matter what, this is our homeland. How can we let outsiders trample on it? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and a black brush silently condensed in it. The great exalt's expression instantly became solemn when he saw this brush. The great exalt slowly clenched his right hand. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at the painter. As for the other two old men, they charged at Endless Sky and the hunchbacked old man instead. Because at this moment, the grand formation was on the verge of shattering under Endless Sky's bombardment. Endless Sky frowned slightly when she noticed the two old men charging at her, and then she raised her hand and slapped it forward. Rumble! The sky trembled violently. In the next moment, Endless Heaven and an old man retreated repeatedly. As they retreated, countless bolts of red lightning shot towards Endless Heaven like flaming serpents. Endless Sky smashed her fist forward. Bang! The bolts of lightning were blasted apart. However, at this moment, a powerful force suddenly swept out from the space in front of her, and then it crushed down towards her. Endless Sky's expression was icy cold, and she raised her hand and slapped down. Bang! The force was instantly blasted apart. However, countless bolts of flames shot towards her from all directions. Endless Sky turned to look at the 6 divine wizards in the distance. In the next moment, she stomped her right foot against the ground, and then she shot towards them. Everywhere she passed, the space in her path immediately shattered. The expressions of the 6 wizards changed, and they suddenly pulled their hands together. In an instant, an enormous fiery red shield of light appeared in front of Endless Sky. Endless Sky immediately swung her fist. Bang! The shield of light cracked apart. However, Endless Sky herself was blasted over 100 back as well. The wizard in the lead stared fixedly at Endless Sky and spoke in a low voice. This woman's strength is truly rare. If she hadn't exhausted herself in that battle with that expert from the Moke clan, then even the joint forces of the 6 of us wouldn't have been able to stop her. An old man by his side had a solemn expression as well. She's very strong. Has she activated a forbidden technique? The wizard in the lead shook his head. It's not time yet. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian below, and soon he frowned. Below, in front of Yi Xian, Baldy, the war army, and Lien Wanli were holding back the black armored figures. However, the 3 of them were firmly suppressed. These black armored figures were truly strong. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound and the Black Qilin were holding back the countless monster beasts. This time, the 2 monster beasts had chosen to work together. If they didn't, only death awaited them. In the air, the wizard in the lead said in a low voice, "We can't let this drag on. Don't hold back." The old man beside him nodded slightly. In the next instant, he swiped his right hand to the side, and the space split open. Soon, something seemed to be sprinting towards them from the depths of the space. Soon, a stone giant ran out of the space. This stone giant was the size of a small mountain, and its eyes were blood-red and emitted crimson flames. When it appeared, it slammed its hands forward. Rumble! The entire horizon shook violently. The wizard in the lead pointed at Yi Xian below. Kill! Hearing the wizard's voice, the stone giant lowered its head to look at Yi Xian below. In the next instant, it directly charged towards Yi Xian's position. This charge caused the entire space to tremble violently. It was incomparably terrifying. Below, when she saw the giant charging over, Lien Wanli, who was fighting with her opponent, had a change of expression. She immediately gave up on the opponent in front of her, turning around to charge at the giant. However, the moment she turned, a spear pierced through her shoulder. Blood splattered everywhere. Lien Wanli didn't care. She sped up and arrived in front of the stone giant. The stone giant's right hand smashed down. Lien Wanli raised her saber and slashed down. Boom! The stone giant's fist smashed down, and Lien Wanli instantly retreated several hundred zhang. As soon as she stopped, a mouthful of blood flowed out of her mouth. Lien Wanli looked up at the stone giant and said softly, "So powerful." As she spoke, she held the Azure Dragon saber in her hand and threw it into the distance. The saber tore through the sky, tearing everything apart. In the distance, the stone giant suddenly stopped, turned around, and smashed down with its fist. Bang! This fist smashed down, and the Azure Dragon saber was directly blasted back. Not far away, Lien Wanli's pupils constricted. She dodged to the side, and the Azure Dragon saber slashed at the nearby city wall. Bang! The city wall trembled violently and instantly cracked. However, it didn't shatter. Right at this moment, Lien Wanli suddenly turned around, and a huge fist smashed towards her. There was no way to dodge. Lien Wanli suddenly raised her arms in front of her. Bang! Lien Wanli was instantly blasted back, and then she smashed heavily against the city wall. On the ground, Lien Wanli's mouth flowed continuously with blood. At the same time, her arms had been shattered, and her bones could be seen. Right at this moment, the stone giant suddenly charged towards Yixian. Seeing this scene, Lien Wanli's expression changed slightly. She charged above Yixian, and was about to raise her saber when she discovered that her arms couldn't move. Lien Wanli was stunned, and then she looked at the descending fist, and she was slightly at a loss. Why did this queen come to throw away her life? As she spoke up to this point, she looked at Yixian below and said softly, "Dying for this fellow, it's not worth it at all." At this moment, the stone giant fist descended. Bang! Chapter 478. Just as the giant stone fist was about to land, a sword suddenly blocked the giant stone fist. The person holding the sword was none other than Yixian. The moment Yixian came into contact with the powerful force of the fist, his expression changed drastically. In the next moment, his whole body fell. As he fell, his left hand grabbed Lien Wanli's waist and dodged to the side, retreating to the bottom of the city wall. Yixian gently placed Lien Wanli on the ground. Looking at Lien Wanli on the ground, Yixian's expression gradually turned cold. They wanted him dead. From Qingqing until now, there were countless people who wanted him dead. It was as if these people would never die. Once one died, another would immediately jump out. And because of him, his former friends were implicated, his younger sister was implicated, and now Lien Wanli was implicated as well. Thinking of this, Yixian's expression gradually turned ferocious. Yixian gently wiped the blood from the corner of Lien Wanli's mouth. "Watch carefully, I'll help you vent your anger." As his voice fell, he turned to look at the giant stone man in the distance. The latter was also looking at him. In the next moment, the giant stone man leaped and punched at Yixian. With a punch, the space immediately turned illusory. Yixian's right hand tightly gripped the sword, his expression becoming increasingly ferocious. When the fist was about 10 feet away from him, he suddenly stabbed out with his sword. One sword to decide life and death. As the sword struck out, the sound of the sword reverberated through the sky. Yixian's sword directly pierced the giant stone man's fist. A head-on collision. Boom! A loud explosion resounded. Following that, the giant stone man retreated rapidly. At the same time, its giant fist began to crack inch by inch. Yixian suddenly leaped and slashed down with his sword. The giant stone man looked up at Yixian. With a fierce roar, it swept its left hand across the sky. With this sweep, the space where the arm passed directly cracked open. In the air, Yixian wielded his sword with both hands and slashed down. This slash directly chopped off the enormous stone arm. At the same time, numerous flying swords slashed at the enormous stone figure's throat. However, the flying swords weren't able to break through its defenses. But at this moment, Yixian suddenly flew to the giant's head with his sword, and in the next moment, he slashed horizontally. The giant's head was instantly sent flying. Yixian landed on the ground. a trickle of blood slowly seeping from the corner of his mouth. Injury. In the previous fight with Wuxia, his wounds were too heavy. Moreover, his wounds hadn't completely healed yet. But at this moment, he didn't have time to care about this injury. His life was more important. Yi Xian slowly walked back to Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli asked softly, "Why was the power of your sword so much stronger than before?" "One sword to decide life and death." Yi Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. Actually, he was slightly depressed because the might of this sword strike was related to his anger. The angrier he was and the more he wanted to kill, the stronger this sword strike would be. On the other hand, under normal circumstances, the might of this sword strike would be ordinary. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's voice suddenly came from the distance. Yi Xian quickly turned to look at the Emperor Hound. At this moment, the Emperor Hound and the evil Qilin were being surrounded by countless demons. Although the Emperor Hound and evil Qilin were powerful, they couldn't withstand being ganged up on. The Emperor Hound suddenly said angrily, "Why aren't you coming to help?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly, then turned to look at Lian Wanli. "I'll take you to a place to rest." After speaking, he directly stored Lian Wanli into the prison pagoda, then turned and charged towards the countless demons in the sky. Inside the prison pagoda, Lian Wanli looked around curiously. At this moment, Xiaoling appeared in front of her. Lian Wanli blinked and said, "How cute!" Xiaoling, oh. As Yi Xian charged towards the Emperor Hound, countless flying swords suddenly tore through the sky. For a time, shrill cries resounded through the sky. In the clouds, the Divine Master in the lead suddenly turned his head and looked down. When he saw that Yi Xian was still alive, his expression became extremely ugly. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head, and at this moment, endless sky was already in front of him. The Holy Mage's expression changed drastically when he saw this, and he suddenly pushed his hands forward. The ball of flames that floated around him transformed into a wave of flames that drowned never-ending sky. Never-ending sky smashed his fist forward. Bang! The flames were instantly shattered. Meanwhile, the Holy Mage had already retreated over 1 kilometer away. At the same time, 2 black-robed old men appeared in front of him. The 2 old men stared fixedly at never-ending sky. Needless to say, never-ending sky's strength had truly exceeded their expectations. This wasn't even never-ending sky's peak state. If he was at his peak state, then they probably wouldn't be able to stop him even if they joined forces. Besides never-ending sky, the other hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan was extremely terrifying as well. He'd forcefully blocked all the cosmic rays. Otherwise, never-ending sky would have been unable to separate herself. The 2 old men exchanged a glance, and then they looked at the 6 holy mages behind them. The holy mage in the lead remained silent. One of the black-robed old men frowned slightly. "Yan Sheng, why are you still hesitating?" The holy mage named Yan Sheng hesitated for a moment, and then he looked at the 5 people behind him. "Activate the restrictive spell." As soon as he finished speaking, the 6 of them formed hand seals and started chanting silently. It didn't take long for an enormous red formation to appear in the sky, and then the sky instantly darkened. The ground was dyed blood red. In the distance, never-ending sky frowned slightly as she looked at the red formation, and then she slowly clenched her right hand. At this moment, an enormous blood-red eye suddenly appeared within the red formation, and it looked directly at never-ending sky. In the next moment, a pillar of blood-red light burst out from the eye. Everywhere it passed, space was instantly plunged into pitch-black darkness. Meanwhile, never-ending sky opened her palm and spun it lightly. A powerful force suddenly swept out from the center of her palm. Bang! Deafening rumbles resounded incessantly above the clouds in the heavens and the earth. Unending Heaven was forced to retreat explosively, and with this retreat, he retreated a full 10,000 feet. Meanwhile, the 2 black-robed old men were about to attack when Yansheng suddenly said, "Let's deal with Yi Xian first." Deal with Yi Xian first. Both of them recovered from their shock. Their main objective this time wasn't just to destroy the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield, but also to get the treasure in Yi Xian's possession. Both of them turned around and flashed down. Down below, Yi Xian seemed to sense something, and his expression changed. He was just about to attack when a Gui appeared in front of him, and then a blood-red scythe shot into the sky. In midair, one of the old men suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! Space warped, and a Gui was pushed back repeatedly before he could even touch the old man. But in the next moment he vanished mysteriously, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the black-robed old man. At the same time, a blood-red scythe silently appeared at the old man's throat. A ripping sound resounded. However, the old man had vanished on the spot, and a Gui suddenly turned around and swung his scythe down. Bang! A Gui was blasted backward. However, the moment he flew back, his scythe flew out of his hand and slashed at a black shadow. Bang! The black shadow shattered, and the old man revealed his true form. There was a long bloody gash on his chest. Seeing this, the black-robed old man's face turned ugly. Nearby, a Gui looked at Yi Xian and said, "Let's go." Yi Xian was about to speak, but the two old men suddenly vanished. A Gui's expression changed, and he charged forward with his scythe. When he saw this, Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all, and he swung his sword swiftly. A ray of sword light tore through the sky. But it didn't take long for the ray of sword light to shatter. At the same time, a black-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Xian, and then he slammed his fist at Yi Xian's face. The powerful force caused the space around Yi Xian to crack inch by inch. In the face of the power of these people, the space was so fragile. Yi Xian held his sword with both hands and swung it forward. He didn't dare to hold back at all. The sword light was as dazzling as the sun, but it only lasted for a moment. The ray of sword light instantly shattered, and Yi Xian retreated repeatedly. He hadn't even stopped when the black-robed old man appeared in front of him again, and then the old man slapped his palm at his face. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly grinned. The next second, the sword in his hand quietly changed to the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian's sword stabbed the old man's palm. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, the black-robed old man didn't move. His eyes were wide open, and they were filled with terror. But it didn't take long for the terror in his eyes to vanish. At this moment, he couldn't move. Soul fixation. In the distance, Yi Xian held his sword with both hands. Blood flowed incessantly from the corners of his mouth, and his chest was dyed red with blood. He knew very well that his strength was far inferior to the black-robed old man, so he could only rely on the soul-suppressing sword. Of course, it wasn't just the soul-suppressing sword, it was the soul-suppressing sword and the soul-fixation sword. If it was just the soul-suppressing sword alone, it wouldn't be able to stop the old man's soul. Fortunately, the soul-suppressing sword and the soul-fixation sword were still effective against the old man. Otherwise, he would really be dead. Even though he wasn't dead, he felt as if his entire body had been sucked dry after using that attack. Moreover, he could clearly sense that Soul had become much weaker. At this moment, Soul's voice resounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Young lord, you can't use that sword technique with me anymore. I need to rest." In next to no time, Soul's voice vanished completely. On the spot, Yi Xian's face was solemn because he realized that Soul's voice was very weak. Obviously, that attack hadn't just consumed a great deal of his strength, it had consumed a great deal of Soul's strength as well. Because he still couldn't fully utilize Soul's strength, he needed Soul's cooperation most of the time. Therefore, every time he used Soul, it consumed a great deal of Soul's strength. At this moment, a Gui was suddenly pushed back. After being pushed back, the other black-robed old man turned to look at Yi Xian, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What did you do to him?" Yi Xian was silent. The black-robed old man's face turned ferocious, and he directly charged at Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly picked up the soul-suppressing sword and pointed it at the black-robed old man. "Old man, I'm not joking. If I hit you with this sword, you might die." The black-robed old man. Chapter 479. The black-robed elder stopped in front of Yi Xian. The black-robed elder stared at Yi Xian. To be more precise, He stared at the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand. He frowned when he saw the sword. A creation-grade artifact. Yi Xian grinned. Good eye. The black-robed elder said in a low voice. Impossible. Even a creation-grade artifact can't kill him in one hit. He looked at Yi Xian. You must have some trump card. Yi Xian's expression changed. He said angrily, I don't have any trump card. Get over here. The black-robed elder stared at Yi Xian. Do you think the old man will be fooled by you? Yi Xian flew into a rage out of humiliation. He charged at the black-robed elder with his sword in hand. The black-robed elder's expression changed. He didn't attack. Instead, he retreated hundreds of meters to put some distance between him and Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to chase after the black-robed elder when he thought of something. He almost forgot that he couldn't defeat the black-robed elder. Opposite Yi Xian, the old man in the black robe glanced at Yi Xian with a hint of wariness in his eyes. The divine sorcerer in the air shouted angrily, What are you waiting for? Kill him now. The black-robed elder looked at the sky. The divine sorcerer and the others couldn't stop Wei Yangtian. The black-robed elder's expression darkened. He looked at Yi Xian again. Yi Xian was swinging the soul-suppressing sword. The black-robed elder clenched his right fist. A Gui appeared next to Yi Xian. The black-robed elder's expression darkened when he saw a Gui. Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, attack. Hearing Yi Xian's words, a Gui was slightly taken aback. In the next moment he rushed out with his sickle in hand. The black-robed old man squinted his eyes. He did not choose to retreat. His body shook and he threw a punch at a Gui. Boom! With a punch, a Gui was sent flying backward. Almost at the same time, a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of the black-robed old man. The sudden appearance of the flying sword caused the black-robed old man's face to change, as he crossed his arms in front of him. Boom! The sword light shattered, but in the next moment, a few more flying swords slashed at him from different angles. The black-robed old man's expression turned savage, as he slapped his hands towards his sides. Rumble! The surrounding space trembled violently. Yi Xian's flying swords were all annihilated. But as soon as the flying swords were destroyed, a Gui appeared in front of the black-robed elder. At the same time, a blood-red scythe slashed at the black-robed elder's throat. Perfect combination. The black-robed old man could not dodge at all. He grabbed the scythe with both hands, but at this time, a flying sword slashed at his head. Boom! The black-robed old man retreated hundreds of feet away. At the same time, his head was split open by the sword. But he did not die, only his body became a little illusory. Beside a Gui, Yi Xian said in a low voice, Not dead. A Gui said in a low voice, At this level, there are many ways to preserve one's life. Yi Xian nodded slightly, You fight close combat, I'll attack from afar. A Gui disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's pupils shrank, and without hesitation, he turned around and fled. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he would definitely die. Especially Yi Xian's flying sword, it was too disgusting. The black-robed old man was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was back in the sky. But at this time, a shadow suddenly appeared above his head, and in the next moment, a powerful force swept across the sky. The black-robed old man's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly raised his hands to block. Rumble! The sky trembled violently as the black-robed old man descended swiftly. Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed. The ray of light pierced through the black-robed old man's throat, and then his head instantly flew into the air while blood sprayed out like a fountain. The black-robed old man's soul was about to flee, but a flying sword was even faster and instantly pierced through his soul. At the same time, the flying sword absorbed his soul. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the soul-suppressing sword returned to his grasp. He raised his head and looked towards the distance, and there was a man standing there. It was Immortal, and he was the one who'd attacked the black-robed old man just now. At this moment, it seemed like Immortal's injuries had recovered slightly. Immortal gazed at Yi Xian, and then he fell silent for a short moment before he suddenly pointed at the 6 divine wizards in the sky. "Support me." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. Bang! Xianxia soared into the sky and charged towards the 6 divine mages. Meanwhile, Yixian lightly pressed 2 fingers together, and then a sword of energy silently condensed. Both he and Xianxia were very clearly aware that even though the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield were fighting to the death, they had no choice but to join forces now. Because all of them would die if they didn't. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of Yansheng's mouth when he saw Xianxia charge towards him. A tiny Saint Realm cultivator. Right at this moment, Xianxia's speed instantly rose explosively, and he arrived in front of Yansheng in the blink of an eye. Yansheng's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. He suddenly shook his left hand, and then a strand of dark blue flames swept out from his palm. Xianxia didn't dodge, and he allowed the palm to strike his chest. However, he smashed his fist against Yansheng's chest as well. Bang! Xianxia was blasted flying while Yansheng retreated repeatedly. At the same time, a flying sword silently arrived in front of Yansheng. Yansheng's expression changed drastically, and he made a grabbing motion with his left hand from afar. This grasp directly grabbed the flying sword, but in the next moment, there was another flying sword behind the flying sword. The divine sorcerer's expression changed drastically, and he hastily dodged to the side. However, it was still a little too late, and the flying sword directly chopped down on his left shoulder. The divine sorcerer's entire arm was instantly sent flying. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly appeared in front of him again. Yansheng was horrified when he saw this scene. At this moment, he had no choice but to give up on fighting against unending sky. He hastily withdrew all his energy, formed a seal with both hands, and chanted softly. Soon, the space in front of Xianxia suddenly trembled, and powerful forces continuously seeped out from the space. Xianxia, who had just arrived in front of him, was instantly sent flying. However, at this moment, Yansheng suddenly turned around. Not far away, Unending Sky was walking towards him, and Unending Sky was carrying 2 bloody heads in his hands. Yansheng's expression instantly darkened when he saw this scene. Previously, the 6 of them had barely been able to restrain Unending Sky, but just now, he had been restrained by Xianxia and Yixian's joint forces. It was this moment that had directly caused them to collapse. Unending Sky had lost control of himself. At the same time, after 2 of the 6 of them died, the formation could no longer be maintained. The hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan in the distance was also no longer restrained, and he immediately walked towards them. On the other side, the great sovereign was still fighting Master Painter. Both of them were shrouded in white light, and the battle situation was unknown. As for below, the Unending Star region's experts had already joined forces with the Moke clan, and their army had already been stopped. Yansheng was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, Unending Sky tossed out his hands, and the 2 bloody heads instantly shattered. The bloody head shattered instantly. She walked towards Yansheng, but the latter remained silent. Unending Sky was just about to attack when Yansheng suddenly turned around and looked into the distance. The foreign realm doesn't want that treasure anymore. Unending Sky raised his head and looked into the distance. Somewhere there, the space suddenly split open, and soon, a middle-aged man walked out. Seeing this, Unending Sky frowned slightly. These enemies came one after another, and there was no end to them. The middle-aged man gazed at Yansheng and said with a smile, "The foreign realm has given up on this treasure. As compensation, the Moke Galaxy and Unending Star region will belong to the foreign realm in the future. My Sky River region only wants that treasure." Yansheng said softly, "Thank you, Heavenly Sovereign." The middle-aged man smiled, and then he gazed at the nearby Unending Sky and said with a smile, "Palace Master Unending, please enlighten me." Unending Sky's face was expressionless. Suddenly, she vanished. The smile on the middle-aged man's face widened, and then his body turned illusory in the next moment. It didn't take long for both Unending Sky and the middle-aged man to vanish. Sheng's expression was extremely solemn. Unending Sky's strength was truly too shocking. If she hadn't exhausted too much of her strength in the battle with the hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan, then no one here would be able to kill her in a one-on-one battle. The hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan gazed at Sheng, and he was about to attack when an afterimage suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the space around him turned illusory, and then rays of cold light shot incessantly towards him. The hunchbacked elder's face fell when he saw this. Obviously, the other party had come prepared, and they wanted to restrain him and Unending Sky. After a moment of silence, the hunchbacked elder's voice suddenly resounded in the sky. The Moke clan will fight to the death. Fight to the death. Fight to the last man. At this moment, all the members of the Moke clan looked up into the sky. Xianxia was looking at the sky as well. His face was expressionless, and his right hand was clenched tightly. Wuxia and the Earth Fiend stood by Xianxia's side. On the other side, Xian stood silently. Not far from him were the War Army, Baldi, and some genius experts from the Great Wall of Buried Heavens. At this moment, all of them were heavily injured. Both sides had fought terribly earlier, and the sudden appearance of the Foreign Land and Sky River sectors experts had caused them to suffer heavy losses. In terms of overall strength, the Neverending sector and the Moke clan combined couldn't compare to the Foreign Land and Sky River sector, especially those powerful demonic beasts. The Emperor Hound and the Evil Qilin were having a hard time resisting them. Fortunately, they had these two demonic beasts to support them. Otherwise, the Moke clan and the Neverending sector would have been finished long ago. At this moment, Sheng suddenly looked down at Xian. Behind him were 3 divine sorcerers. 4 peak-level super experts. Sheng looked down at Xian and the others and said softly, "Give it all you have." As soon as he said that, the 3 sorcerers behind him suddenly took out 3 teleportation arrays. Soon, countless experts rushed out of these teleportation arrays. In an instant, the entire sky turned pitch black. Below, Xianxia suddenly looked at Xian, and Xian also turned to look at Imoku. Imoku said, "Can you still use that sword of yours?" Xian was slightly stunned. Soon, he knew that Imoku was talking about the soul-suppressing sword, so he shook his head. Imoku nodded. With a flick of his finger, a sword fell in front of Xian. The sword was about 4 feet long, dark gray in color. The blade was extremely thin, and the tip was extremely long. On the tip of the sword, there was a dot of black light. Aside from that, there were 2 pitch-black eyes on both sides of the hilt. Xian was puzzled. Xianxia said softly, "Imoku's sword, one of the Moke clan's ultimate treasures. It has the power of Moke and the Moke sword. I'll lend it to you." As he spoke, he paused and said, "I'll lend it to you, Xian." Chapter 480. The Moke Sword. Xian looked at the sword in front of him, stunned and confused. Xianxia looked up at the sky and said softly, "If we don't join forces, none of us will survive." Behind Xianxia, Wuxia and the other Moke clan experts were silent. The never-ending Starfield experts on Xian's side were also silent. Join forces. At that moment, both the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield experts understood one thing. If they didn't join forces, only death awaited them. If they joined forces, there might be a way out. Although they had once been enemies, they had to join forces for survival now. Xian held the Moke sword in front of him. Instantly, a powerful force surged out of the sword and gathered in his body. Xian's body trembled. He opened his eyes abruptly. There were 2 blood-red pupils in his eyes. Xian's expression changed. He quickly let go of the sword and looked at Xianxia. Xianxia said softly, "The Moke sword. Since the first ancestor of the Moke clan, no one has been able to use this sword. This sword has the power of the Moke and the intent to kill. Since the first ancestor, no one in the Moke clan has been able to use this sword. The first ancestor's soul gave this sword to me, hoping that I could use it. However, I'm not interested in swordsmanship, so..." As he spoke, he looked at Xian. "I'll lend it to you for now." Xian was silent. The moment he held the sword, he felt a powerful force enter his body. But at the same time, he felt like he wasn't himself. That force wanted to enslave him. And in that instant, his mind was filled with murderous intent. It wanted to kill everything. Xianxia suddenly said, "You don't dare to take it?" Xian shook his head. "We're all going to die. Why wouldn't I dare to take it?" As soon as he finished speaking, he held the moke sword. Boom! A powerful force instantly surged into Xian's body. In an instant, Xian's eyes opened again. Within his eye sockets were two blood-red pupils. Xian gripped his sword tightly in his right hand, his body trembling uncontrollably. Next to Xian, War Army said in a deep voice, "Brother Yi, are you okay?" Xian said with a trembling voice, "Kill, I want to kill someone." War Army. Beside Xian, Xianxia looked up at the god sorcerers and said softly, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly stomped his right foot and soared into the sky. Earth Fiend and the others followed closely behind, but Wuxia did not follow them. On Xian's side, Baldy and the others did not want to be outdone. They all soared into the sky. Xian was still in his original position. At this moment, he was almost unable to control that power. He realized that his mind was a little chaotic. At this moment, Wuxia, who was next to Xian, suddenly said, "Kill. Kill to get rid of that power." Xian directly soared into the sky and charged toward the foreign experts in the sky. In the sky, God Sorcerer Xianxia looked at Xianxia and the others who were charging toward him expressionlessly. Behind him, countless experts rushed toward Xianxia and the others. Xianxia, who was charging at the forefront, suddenly reached out with his right hand and grabbed, boom. The space in front of him directly distorted and became illusory. The next moment, a powerful force swept out from this space. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with screams. Xianxia looked at Xianxia and was about to make a move. At this moment, Mr. Bai and the Moke clan's Xianxia suddenly appeared in front of him. They naturally couldn't allow Xianxia to attack Xianxia, Xian, and the others. Because Xianxia, Xian, and the others were currently unable to resist Xianxia. Mr. Bai and Gio looked at each other. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. They directly rushed toward Xianxia. Xianxia's eyes gradually turned cold. Sacrificial array. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pulled his hands and a fiery red flag appeared in front of him. Behind him, 3 fiery red flags also appeared in front of the 3 god sorcerers. In the next moment, the 4 fiery red flags directly became illusory. At the same time, the surrounding space suddenly heated up. Waves of fire seeped out from the surrounding space and drowned Mr. Bai and Xianxia. Xianxia turned to look at one of the god sorcerers. "You go deal with that, Xian." The god sorcerer nodded slightly. In the next moment, he disappeared on the spot. At the same time, a wave of fire fell from the sky and headed straight for Xian. Below, Xian seemed to have sensed it and suddenly looked up. In the next moment, he suddenly stomped his right foot and transformed into a ray of sword light that shot into the sky. Just like that, a ray of fire and a ray of sword light collided in the sky in the most brutal way possible. Boom! The entire sky trembled. Countless rays of sword light and fire shook the sky, and Xian was shaken down by the powerful force. On the ground below, boom! Xian landed on the ground, and the entire ground shook violently. At this moment, his body had cracked and was still covered in flames. However, a powerful force was continuously gathering towards his body. Emoka force. This force was constantly repairing Xian's body, but it was also constantly corroding his mind. If it wasn't for his strong mind, he would have been enslaved by this force. In the sky, the god sorcerer stared at Xian. He didn't expect Xian to be able to resist his attack. One had to know that his realm was several levels higher than Xian's. Not only was Xian a monster, but Xianxia was also a monster. The god sorcerer turned to look at Xianxia in the distance. At this moment, Xianxia was crazily slaughtering. Apart from the experts of the older generation, almost no one could stop him. Apart from that, the evil Qilin and Emperor Hound were also extremely terrifying. After the two evil beasts joined forces, they were able to stop most of the demons. If this continued, if the Sky Sovereign and Great Sovereign couldn't win, their situation would become extremely bad. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of sword light and shot into the sky. The god sorcerer withdrew his thoughts and looked down at Yi Xian. Wherever the sword light passed, the space was torn apart inch by inch. The god sorcerer formed a seal with both hands. In the next moment, the space in front of him began to violently tremble like waves. When Yi Xian rushed in front of him, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Forbidden space technique, freeze. As soon as he said that, the space around him and Yi Xian suddenly trembled and rapidly shrank, trapping Yi Xian in place. The god sorcerer coldly looked at Yi Xian. You're still too young. At this moment, the space suddenly returned to normal. Yi Xian's sword pierced straight into the space between the god sorcerer's eyebrows. Seeing this, the god sorcerer's expression changed drastically. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be able to break through his forbidden technique so easily. In his opinion, this was simply impossible. However, he didn't have time to think so much. He pulled his hands forward and an illusory shield appeared in front of him. Yi Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. The illusory shield shook violently and then cracked. Yi Xian held the sword and suddenly spun. Boom. The shield suddenly shattered, and the sword pierced straight through. However, at this moment, the god sorcerer had already retreated hundreds of feet. At the same time, one after another fire arrows were launched at Yi Xian like a storm. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily. The next moment he held the sword and swung it forward. In an instant, countless sword lights shot out from the Moke sword. This chapter is not over. Please continue. They shot out. Rumble, rumble, rumble. For a moment, there was a series of explosions. In the distance, the god sorcerer suddenly formed a strange seal with both hands. Soon, tens of thousands of fire arrows appeared around him. The god sorcerer looked at Yi Xian in the distant sea of fire. He suddenly formed a seal with both hands. 10,000 flames burning the heavens. As soon as he said that, the fire arrows suddenly pierced through space and shot toward Yi Xian in the distance. In the distant sea of fire, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. Countless sword lights shot out from his eyes. However, this time, the sword lights were gray in color. A wave of sword lights swept out and instantly destroyed the fire arrows. The god sorcerer was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot. Pissed. A ray of sword light flashed across the battlefield. The god sorcerer's pupils suddenly constricted. In the next moment, a thin layer of fire appeared all over his body. At this moment, Yi Xian was already behind the god sorcerer. Yi Xian stood ramrod straight. There was a drop of blood on the tip of the Moke sword in his hand. Behind Yi Xian, the god sorcerer looked forward in disbelief. He was still forming a seal with both hands, and a powerful force was surging around him. How did he die? Of course he knew. At that moment, Yi Xian's speed instantly increased by at least 5 times. He was less than 100 feet away from Yi Xian just now. At such a short distance, the 5 times speed instantly took his life. Just a little bit more. If Yi Xian had been a little bit slower, even just a little bit, he would have been able to block this fatal sword strike. Unfortunately, it was just this little bit that cost him his life. Gradually, the god sorcerer's gaze dissipated. At this moment, a sword suddenly entered the god sorcerer's body. Soul-suppressing sword. In an instant, the god sorcerer's soul was directly devoured. At this moment, Soul's somewhat excited voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young master, this person's soul and mental strength are extremely powerful. If I devour 2 more, I will definitely be able to greatly improve. Moreover, I will be able to unlock new moves. In the air, Yi Xian held the sword in his hand tightly. At this moment, he still had a trace of rationality, so he could naturally understand the soul-suppressing sword's words. However, he already felt that he could not suppress the Moke force and the desire to kill. Right now, his mind was filled with the thought of killing. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword returned to Yi Xian's body. Young master, the power in that sword does not belong to you. Remember, do not be controlled by it. Otherwise, young master will be enslaved by the sword. Enslaved by the sword? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he asked, "What do you mean?" Soul said in a low voice, "A person can enslave the sword, and the sword can also enslave a person. Young master, remember, do not be enslaved by the sword. Otherwise, it will control you to attack the people closest to you and completely cut off all your thoughts." At this point, she paused slightly, and then she said, "If young master is controlled, it is very likely that he will personally kill your sister." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily, "Mother asterisk Ker, how dare it!" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly picked up the moke sword and roared like a wild beast, "You better keep a low profile." The moke sword. P.S. Recently, I've been writing a fanfic. The fanfic will be combined with the main text, and it can be considered as explaining some things about the Great Sword Realm. As for the fanfic, whose fanfic do you want to see? Because the big shots in the Great Sword Realm all have their own lives, and there are many things that they haven't explained clearly. I will read your messages and suggestions carefully. End of this chapter. Chapter 481. It had to be said that right now, Yi Xian was extremely irascible. He absolutely would not allow anyone to harm Yi Ling, including himself. In his rage, Yi Xian forcibly suppressed the corrosion of that power. His mind became clearer and clearer. However, he was still in a bit of a difficult situation, because that power was too strong. It was so strong that he could not control it right now. Yi Xian looked up into the sky. The next moment, he turned into a gray sword light and shot into the sky. Slaughter! He had to vent this power. Otherwise, this power would sooner or later devour him. As the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield joined forces, the battle situation gradually changed. Because right now, no one could stop Yi Xian and Emocia. The two were practically invincible, and the two evil beasts were growing stronger as they fought. The never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan began to gain the upper hand. In the void, a white light suddenly dissipated. The painter and the Great Sovereign appeared in the sky. However, at this moment, the Great Sovereign's face was pale and he was extremely weak. The Great Sovereign stared at the distant painter. "I underestimated you." Underestimated? Only now did he realize that this artist's strength was much greater than he had expected. Because in his opinion, he and the painter were equally matched. Unfortunately, after a round of fighting, he had been completely defeated. In the distance, the painter walked towards the Great Sovereign. "You underestimated the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield." The Great Sovereign glanced down. At this moment, the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan had begun to counterattack. The situation was extremely unfavorable for the Sky River Starfield and the Foreign Land Starfield, especially Emocia, Yi Xian, and the others. Besides the experts of the older generation, everyone else couldn't even last a single round in front of these two people. At this moment, the painter raised her jade-like hand and a powerful force instantly enveloped the Great Sovereign. The Great Sovereign looked up at the painter and grinned. "Do you think you can win?" The painter frowned slightly. The Great Sovereign said again, "You will never know who will attack you this time." The painter muttered to herself. The next moment, she clenched her jade-like hand. Boom! The Great Sovereign directly turned into nothingness. She raised her head to look at the sky, and in the next instant, she waved her jade-like hands, and a black brush tore through the sky. In the next instant, countless screams rang out. "Retreat!" Suddenly, a voice resounded in the sky. Soon, the experts of the Milky Way star region and the foreign domain began to retreat, and before long, they had retreated to the sky above the clouds. In the air, the celestial venerate and endless heaven appeared before everyone again. Wei Yangtian had his hands behind his back, his face pale, while the heavenly lord was expressionless. From the outside, he did not seem to be injured. At this moment, Painter appeared beside endless heaven. The painter looked at the Empyrean. It's over. The Empyrean glanced at the painter and faintly smiled. No, this is just the beginning. The painter said softly, Is that so? The Celestial Venerable said softly, You've underestimated the importance of that treasure. As he spoke, he turned to look at the horizon. We've already given it our all. Are you still not going to act? Hearing the Sky Sovereign's words, unending sky, and the painter frowned. Everyone looked in the direction the Celestial Venerable was looking at. Soon, the space there split open, and an old man in purple robes walked out. The purple-robed old man wore a square official hat and held a long purple token in his right hand. On his left shoulder, there were 2 words, Order. Seeing the purple-robed old man, the painter immediately frowned. Star Order Enforcer. The universe was vast and boundless, with countless star regions. In these star regions, there was a group of people who protected the universe and maintained its order. These people were the Star Order Enforcers, the most mysterious and powerful group of people in the vast universe. Seeing the old man appear, the painter and Endless Heaven understood that the foreign domain and the Milky Way star region were just pawns. The Star Order Enforcer was the true mastermind. In the air, the purple-robed old man looked at the painter and unending sky. This Yixian is the person we want. The painter looked at the purple-robed old man. Your goal is not just Yixian. What I don't understand is that your goal is only Yixian. Why are you attacking the never-ending star region? The purple-robed old man said calmly, Don't the never-ending star region and the Moke clan know? The painter looked at Unending Sky. Unending Sky said calmly, They once contacted us and demanded that the never-ending star region pay tribute to them every 5 years. I refused. The hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan walked over. The Moke clan also refused. The painter nodded slightly. I understand. In the air, the purple-robed old man glanced at the painter and the other 2. Surrender, and you will be spared. Surrender? Unending Sky sneered. You want me to surrender? Who do you think you are? Next to Unending Sky, the hunchbacked old man chuckled. Surrender? The Moke clan has never knelt to anyone since our ancestors. In the air, the purple-robed old man's expression was cold. You have a death wish. As soon as he finished speaking, he tapped the token in his right hand. Instantly, a huge stone platform appeared in front of him. There were nearly 100 teleportation arrays on the stone platform. Soon, the teleportation arrays began to tremble, as if something was about to come out. In the air, the purple-robed old man looked down at Unending Sky and the others. Finally, his gaze landed on Yixian. At that moment, Yixian's eyes were tightly shut, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Suppress. He was forcefully suppressing the Moke power in his body and the desire to kill. As if sensing the purple-robed old man's gaze, Yixian looked up at him. The next moment, an illusory Xiaota appeared between his brows. When they saw the illusory pagoda, the expressions on the faces of all the spectators changed. Treasure. The purple-robed old man stared at the Xiaota. Yixian suddenly grinned. Do you want it? The purple-robed old man narrowed his eyes. At that moment, Yixian said, I'm not giving it to you. Everyone, the purple-robed old man looked at Yixian, his eyes gradually turning cold. Don't worry, I'll get it myself. At that moment, Yixian raised his sword and charged at the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man looked at Yixian expressionlessly. In the air, a hand suddenly pressed down on Yixian's shoulder. Painter. Painter looked at Yixian. Can you beat him? Yixian's voice trembled. I don't know. Painter's mouth twitched. If you don't know, why are you still going? Yixian was confused. Do I have to go? Painter. At that moment, the purple-robed old man suddenly looked at the Celestial Venerate and the others. We only want that treasure. The rest belongs to your Sky River sector and the foreign sector. The Celestial Venerate was silent. The purple-robed old man said calmly, That treasure is supreme. Even if I give it to you, you can't keep it. Understand? The Celestial Venerate said in a low voice, What is it? Why? The purple-robed old man interrupted the Celestial Venerate. The more you know, the faster you die. The celestial venerate glanced at the purple-robed old man and said no more. At that moment, not far away, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Why wait for them to come?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "We can kill them before they come." Next to Yi Xian, Baldy said softly, "That makes sense." Painter looked at Midnight Sky, who said calmly, "Kill." Kill. As soon as she finished speaking, she and Master Painter rushed out. The hunchbacked old man also rushed out. Behind the three, the Moke clan and the Never-Ending Sector's powerhouses also rushed out. In the air, the purple-robed old man frowned. The next moment, he looked at Yan Sheng and the Great Sovereign. "Stop them." The Great Sovereign hesitated, then directly rushed toward Midnight Sky. As for the gods' wizards, they started to target Painter. As for the hunchbacked old man, he was stopped by a shadow. This shadow was the expert who had fought with him before. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Destroy the formation." As his voice faded, a flying sword pierced through the air. It was extremely fast and arrived before the stone platform in an instant. However, just as it was about to slash at the stone platform, a hand suddenly grabbed the sword light. It was the purple-robed old man's hand. The purple-robed old man clenched his fist lightly. Boom! The sword light shattered. The purple-robed old man looked down at Yi Xian, and then he appeared in front of Yi Xian without any warning. His right hand grabbed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly felt like his entire body had been frozen in place. Right at that moment, a white shadow appeared in front of him. It was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai punched, but the purple-robed old man didn't stop there. He pressed his hand against Mr. Bai's fist. Rumble! A powerful force suddenly swept out, and Yi Xian, who was behind Mr. White, was suddenly shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. Meanwhile, a flying sword silently appeared at the purple-robed old man's throat. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly. His figure shook, and the flying sword slashed through the air. However, it slashed through the air, and he was already behind Mr. Bai. He didn't attack Mr. Bai. Instead, he grabbed at Yi Xian. He was extremely fast. Yi Xian couldn't dodge because the purple-robed old man was too fast. He held the Moke sword with both hands and slashed forward. A dark gray sword light slashed down viciously. Boom! The ray of sword light instantly shattered, but the purple-robed old man was pushed back by around 3 m. He glanced at his palm, and then at Yi Xian with a frown. "Your sword has some skill." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, a powerful force assaulted him from behind. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly, and then he turned around and slammed his fist forward. It was a very ordinary punch, but it made Mr. Bai retreat by 300 m. As soon as Mr. Bai stopped, the space around him shattered and transformed into pitch-black darkness. The purple-robed old man glanced at Mr. Bai. "I underestimated you. But I don't have time to deal with you now." As he spoke, he turned around to look at Yi Xian, and then he shot explosively towards Yi Xian. He was so fast that Yi Xian couldn't even see him. Yi Xian stomped his right foot against the ground and soared into the air. At the same time, he slashed down with his sword in both hands. However, his sword was stopped by a hand. The purple-robed old man's hand. The purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. He was about to attack when a shadow suddenly flashed to his side, and then a fist smashed towards his head. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly and blocked with his left hand. Bang! The powerful force pushed the purple-robed old man back by around 3 m, but he didn't stop. Numerous flying swords slashed towards him. Bang! The purple-robed old man retreated by another few meters. Meanwhile, there was another person by Yi Xian's side. Xianxia. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. "I'll fight him in close combat. You use your flying swords. Any problems?" Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Kill him." Chapter 482. As Yi Xian's voice faded, Xianxia charged forward. Xianxia's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man was expressionless. When Mo Xie punched at him, his body suddenly became illusory. Mo Xie's punch hit empty air. Mo Xie's expression changed slightly. He turned around, but at this moment, a palm imprinted on his chest. Mo Xie's entire body flew back. However, almost at the same moment Mo Xie flew back, a flying sword quietly appeared behind the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man turned around, and with a shake of his body, the flying sword appeared behind him. The purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian and clenched his fist. A powerful force instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Chop! Yi Xian's voice suddenly rang out. Immediately, a sword light tore down in front of Yi Xian. The purple-robed old man's force was directly torn open by Yi Xian's sword. The purple-robed old man squinted his eyes and was about to attack again. However, Mo Xie suddenly appeared behind him. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly. He turned around and punched out. Mo Xie also punched out. Force against force. Rumble. Mo Xie's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away by the purple-robed old man's fist. However, at this moment, several flying swords suddenly slashed at the purple-robed old man. However, the purple-robed old man's body instantly became illusory. The flying swords seemed to have slashed at the air and had no effect at all. At this moment, the purple-robed old man had already appeared in front of Yi Xian. He was about to attack when Yi Xian's eyes suddenly opened and a wave of sword light vibrated out. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly, and his arm blocked in front of him. Rumble! Rumble! The purple-robed old man retreated continuously. This time, he retreated a full 30 meters. After he stopped, he glanced at his arm. His arm was covered in sword scars. The purple-robed old man's face darkened. He looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak, but behind him, an afterimage was rapidly flying towards him. Mo Xie! The purple-robed old man turned around and slapped down. Rumble! Space instantly ruptured. Mo Xie, who had just arrived in front of the purple-robed elder, was knocked flying. Almost at the same time, he turned around and chopped down with his palm. A wave of sword light was directly shattered by him. The violet-robed old man gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and he was just about to attack once more when a series of explosions suddenly resounded from the distant horizon. The purple-robed elder turned around and saw Yan Sheng and the others retreating in the sky. Moreover, there were only 2 divine wizards left. The old man frowned slightly when he witnessed this scene. He immediately withdrew his gaze and looked at Yi Xian while slowly clenching his right hand. He had to end the battle quickly. The purple-robed elders suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He was about to make a move when a white figure suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the purple-robed old man retreated several dozen zhang. This white figure was none other than Endless Heaven. Endless Sky looked coldly at the purple-robed elder. You like bullying the weak so much? The purple-robed elder stared coldly at Endless Sky. You will pay a painful price for your stubbornness. Endless Sky sneered. Is that so? As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Go break that formation. Yi Xian nodded and charged towards the stone platform in the sky. The purple-robed elder frowned slightly. Stop him. As soon as he finished speaking, several black shadows suddenly dashed down toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Mo Xie suddenly appeared in front of him. Mo Xie glanced at the black figures. You go, I'll deal with them. Yi Xian nodded slightly and stomped his right foot. He transformed into a sword light and shot towards the horizon. The black shadow warriors were about to stop Yi Xian, but at this moment, Mo Xie suddenly appeared in front of them and slapped his hands forward. Rumble! The space before him rippled like a wave. Those black figures that were about to chase after Yi Xian were all stopped. The leading black figure said solemnly, Deal with this person first. The moment he finished speaking, he charged towards Mo Xie. Mo Xie clenched his right hand. In the next moment, he stomped his right foot and charged straight over. At this moment, Yi Xian had already arrived before the stone platform. There were nearly 100 teleportation formations on the stone platform. The teleportation formations were shaking violently. Clearly, something was being teleported. Yi Xian wielded his sword and slashed forward. A ray of sword light flew out. Just as the ray of sword light was about to slash the teleportation formation, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the sword light and pointed a finger. Rumble! The sword light shattered. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly changed because numerous flying swords were already standing on the teleportation formations. Rumble! On the teleportation platforms, the teleportation formations began to crumble one after another. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. He suddenly disappeared. Rumble! Everywhere the middle-aged man passed, space trembled violently. It was an extremely shocking sight. Yi Xian held the Emoku sword with both hands. At this moment, countless strands of Emoku energy converged madly into his body. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward and slashed down with his sword. This space shattered as the sword passed. Rumble! Yi Xian's attack blasted the middle-aged man back. Yi Xian didn't pursue the middle-aged man, and he just pressed his fingers together and pointed towards the left instead. A few rays of light slashed towards the teleportation formations, and it didn't take long for the teleportation formations to be destroyed. The middle-aged man's expression became extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, the violet-robed old man who was fighting Wei Yang Tian had stopped as well. Retreat! Meanwhile, a voice resounded abruptly, and it didn't take long for the experts of the Foreign Territory and Sky River region to start retreating, and they retreated into the starry sky. Wei Yang Tian was about to pursue them when Master Painter stopped her. Wei Yang Tian frowned slightly. "Why aren't you following up on your victory?" Master Painter shook his head. "Look down below." Wei Yang Tian looked down. At this moment, the ground below was covered in corpses. There were experts from the Foreign Territory and Sky River region, and there were also experts from the Moke Clan and Neverending Starfield. As for the remaining experts from the Moke Clan and Neverending Starfield, most of them were heavily injured. They were utterly unable to continue fighting. Wei Yang Tian fell silent. Master Painter spoke softly, "Recuperate for a while." Wei Yang Tian spoke solemnly, "They'll make a comeback. At that time, they'll be even stronger." Master Painter said, "We can make preparations for that as well, right?" Wei Yang Tian fell silent. The violet-robed old man looked down at Wei Yang Tian and the others. "Wei Yang Tian, it'll be the end of all of you when we return." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. On the other hand, the armies of the Foreign Territory and Sky River region retreated successively. The experts of the Moke Clan and Neverending Starfield heaved sighs of relief when they saw the experts of Sky River region and the Foreign Territory retreat. They heaved huge sighs of relief. They weren't afraid of death, but they wanted to live. At that moment, Master Painter, Wei Yang Tian, and the hunchbacked old man suddenly looked up at the starry sky. At that moment, a huge starry web enveloped the entire galaxy above Burial Great Wall. Seeing this, Wei Yang Tian frowned slightly and was about to attack. Master Painter shook her head. "Let them set up the array." The hunchbacked old man said softly, "Yes, unless we give up on Neverending Starfield, it's meaningless." After a moment of silence, Wei Yang Tian turned to look at everyone present. "Heal." As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished. Master Painter looked at the hunchbacked old man and said softly, "Gentleman Mo, let's have a chat?" The hunchbacked old man called Gentleman Mo hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Let's chat." Master Painter nodded slightly. "Very well." Soon, the experts of the Moke Clan and Neverending Starfield returned to their respective places. However, the atmosphere had become slightly strange. Before this, they were all mortal enemies. But just now, they had joined forces against the enemy. Below, Xie sat on the ground. Beside him were Wuxia, Earth Fiend, and the evil Qilin. By now, they were all severely injured. Xie seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked around. "Where's Yi Xian?" Wuxia looked around. "He was just here." But Xie said softly, "Moke sword," saying that he looked at Wuxia. Will he not return it? Zuoqing hesitated for a moment and then said, as the most outstanding genius of never-ending Starfield, he should return it, Xie said softly, probably. In the void, the purple-robed old man was expressionless. Beside him were the Sky River Starfield's heavenly venerate and the foreign divine sorcerer. At that moment, except for the purple-robed old man, the rest of the people had ugly expressions. They had suffered a crushing defeat. This time, they had been completely confident of winning, but things had turned out this way. The heavenly venerate said softly, "We underestimated them." Yanxing nodded. Indeed. They had always treated the Mo clan and never-ending Starfield seriously. That was why they had only appeared after the never-ending Starfield and Mo clan had fought to the death. But they had not expected that after the battle, their combat power would still be so strong. At that moment, the heavenly venerate looked at the purple-robed old man. Brother Gu Lian, if we want to obtain never-ending Starfield, we must take care of never-ending Sky, Master Painter, and the ancestral patriarch of Mo clan. Saying that, he paused and then said, besides that, Xian and Xie are also extremely monstrous. If they grow up, we must take them seriously. The purple-robed old man called Gu Lian stopped and looked at the token in his hand. After a moment, he said softly, the higher-ups have given the order to summon the experts from the surrounding starfields. We will attack in 2 days. Prepare your people. The heavenly venerate frowned slightly. 2 days? Why the rush? The purple-robed old man said calmly, are we going to let them rest and recuperate? The heavenly venerate was silent. The purple-robed old man said, the spirit chi is drying up, and there are fewer and fewer starfields that can survive. If we do not take over never-ending Starfield, the Sky River Starfield and the foreign domain will completely dry up in a few decades and become dead starfields. The heavenly venerate said in a low voice, if the price is too high, Gu Lian interrupted the heavenly venerate. Price? Don't we have to pay a price to survive? We only want the treasure on Yixian. The rest is yours. Yanxing suddenly said, this Yixian's background might not be simple. According to our investigation, there seems to be a mysterious expert behind him. Gu Lian slowly closed his eyes. No matter how strong the expert is, he is useless in front of our planet master. P.S. I read the comments yesterday. Most of you want to read the Earth's chapters. Chapter 483. Burial Sky Great Wall. Inside the stone house. As soon as Yixian returned to the stone house, he threw the Moke sword into the prison pagoda. In an instant he slumped to the ground. Weakness. That was how he felt at the moment. When he held the Moke sword, he did not feel this way. Not only that, but his body was full of power. Temptation. The temptation of the Moke sword was too great. Because of this, he hurriedly threw the sword into the prison pagoda. He did not want to be enslaved by the sword, although that feeling was really good. But he wanted to control the sword himself, not be enslaved by it. Not far from Yixian, Baldy and the war army were there. Seeing Yixian like a pile of mud, the war army said in a low voice, Brother Yi, are you okay? Yixian shook his head slightly. I won't die yet. The war army said softly, that's good. Saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression became somewhat complicated. I never thought that we would join forces with the Mo clan. Baldy also said, I didn't expect it, but if we don't join forces, everyone will die. Saying that, he looked at Yixian. Brother Yi, what do you think? Yixian was silent for a moment and then said, the Mo clan and we are all trying to survive. Baldy said in a low voice, but many of our brothers died in their hands. The war army nodded. When I think of this, I can't get over it. Yixian sat cross-legged and looked at the war army and Baldy. I won't let you forget the hatred, and the Mo clan definitely won't either. But now we have a stronger enemy. Saying that, he turned to look outside the stone house and said softly, if we join forces, we might have a chance of survival. Hatred? He didn't know much about the enmity between the Mo clan and the never-ending star domain, but he knew that if they couldn't let go of this enmity, then both sides would die. In fact, he also knew that the war army and Baldy also knew this, but the two of them still couldn't let it go. Indeed, they were once mortal enemies, but now they had to work together. It was a little awkward. At this time, the war army suddenly said, however, compared to the Moke clan, I want to kill the Sky River sector and the foreign realm more. Baldy nodded. Me too. Yixian smiled and said, hurry up and heal your injuries. War army and Baldy nodded and began to heal their wounds. Yixian sat cross-legged on the ground and began to frantically absorb the purple origin crystals. At the same time, his mind submerged into his body. Inside the prison pagoda, the sword of Moku was wandering aimlessly. Soon, it arrived at the second floor. On the second floor, Xiaoling, who was watering the spirit fruits, suddenly stopped and turned to look at the sword of Moku. The sword of Moku transformed into a sword beam and pierced a spirit fruit. Soon, the spirit fruit was swallowed by it. Little Ling, flared up with rage when she witnessed this scene, and she swiftly slapped her palm towards the sword of Moke. The sword of Moke didn't give Xiaoling any face and slashed at Xiaoling. Seeing this, Yixian's expression changed and he was about to attack. At this time, on the top of the pagoda, the sword in the middle suddenly shook violently. The next moment, a sword beam appeared on the second floor. Boom! The sword of Moku was instantly sent flying. Outside, Yixian was stunned. The sword at the top of the pagoda had attacked? On the second floor, Xiaoling held the sword and madly chased after the sword of Moku. At first, the sword of Moku didn't give up and fought back. But soon it began to flee, because when it clashed with the sword in Xiaoling's hand, it cracked. If Xiaoling had used just a little more strength, it would have shattered. The sword of Moku fled madly in the prison pagoda while Xiaoling chased after it. But she was too slow and couldn't catch up to the sword of Moku. However, Xiaoling had no intention of giving up. She held the sword and madly chased after the sword of Moku. Yixian shook his head and smiled. He collected his thoughts and focused on healing. About 2 hours later, Yixian got up and left the stone house. He walked to the side of the city wall. Below the wall, some people were cleaning up the battlefield. There were many corpses. The smell of blood was everywhere. At this moment, a woman walked to Yixian's side. It was the painter. The painter looked at the corpses below and said softly, "What do you think?" Yixian was silent for a moment and then said, "The world is cruel." The painter looked at Yixian. "What else?" Yixian said softly, "War is cruel." The painter looked at the corpses below. "It is cruel. In this chaotic world, human life is always so worthless." Yixian looked at the painter. "What are you trying to say, senior?" The painter looked straight at Yixian. "Stop the war." Yixian shook his head. "It's difficult." The painter said softly, "It is difficult. All these years, I've been dealing with the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield, but it's useless." Yixian said, "In my opinion, only great strength can stop the war." The painter looked at Yixian. Yixian smiled. "Senior is very strong. Very strong. But what if Senior is 10 times or 100 times stronger than you are now? At that time, Senior can stop the war with a single word." The painter smiled. "Your words are not without reason. Indeed, I can kill many people and even save many, but I can't stop this person's greed and evil." As she spoke, she looked up at the horizon. At this moment, the horizon was covered by an enormous net of stars. The painter said softly, "They won't let you go." Yixian said, "I know." The painter said, "When the war begins, never ending, and I will definitely be delayed. At that time, how will you protect yourself?" Yixian fell silent. The painter looked at Yixian. "You have 2 choices now. 1, hand over that treasure and divert this disaster away. 2, flee." Yixian smiled bitterly. "There's nothing I can do." The painter asked, "Why?" Yixian said, "First, it's not that I don't want to hand over this treasure, but this treasure is connected to my mind. Unless it leaves voluntarily, I can't do anything to it. Nothing." As he said, this prison pagoda was not something he could control. At least, he couldn't remove it. Also, the second-floor god had once told him that the prison pagoda followed him because of the plain-dressed woman. In short, he was very aggrieved. The painter glanced at Yi Xian. Since you can't hand over the treasure, why don't you flee? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Can I flee? The painter said softly, that's true. You are their primary target. No matter where you flee, they won't let you go. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Anyone can flee, but I can't. If I stay here and follow you, I might have a chance of survival. Saying this, he paused and said, if you are afraid that I will implicate you, I can leave. The painter smiled. Why would we? If you leave, they will still not let the never-ending star domain go. If you stay here, you will be of great help to us, won't you? Yi Xian smiled faintly and looked up at the horizon. The painter said, I have to go somewhere else. You stay here and help Mr. Bai, help him persuade Wei Yang. She is straightforward and hot-tempered. She will easily do something extreme. Yi Xian nodded. But the painter turned and left. At that moment, the painter suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. Can I go inside? Yi Xian was stunned. Inside? The painter knew about the prison pagoda? The painter smiled and said, your body has its own space, right? Yi Xian nodded. Forgive me for being blunt, but you'd better not go in. The painter asked, why? Yi Xian hesitated and said, it's dangerous. He knew that the painter was very powerful, far more powerful than he imagined. However, his intuition told him that the fifth floor was even more powerful. Most importantly, if the painter entered and fought with the fifth floor, he would be the unlucky one. The painter thought and said, after this is over, if we are all alive, I would like to see it. Is that okay? Yi Xian smiled and said, sure. The painter smiled faintly and turned to leave. On the city wall, Yi Xian turned and looked far away. At the end was the Moke clan. This Moke sword, Yi Xian thought and said, I will definitely return this sword. I'm busy now. I will return it in the future. With that he turned and left. Moke clan in a hall. The hunchbacked elder looked at Xianxia. You lent the sword to Yi Xian? Xianxia nodded. The hunchbacked elder was silent for a moment and said, will he return it? Xianxia hesitated and said, as the most monstrous genius of never-ending Starfield, I believe in his character. The hunchbacked elder said softly, according to my investigation, in this guy's eyes, character is not worth much. Xianxia. Chapter 484. After Xianxia left the hall, he went to the top of a mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. He slowly closed his eyes and placed his hands on his legs. At that moment, his mind was filled with images of the previous battle. After that battle, he had also discovered many of his shortcomings. Apart from that, he had also learned many things. In particular, he had benefited greatly from the battle with Yi Xian. In the following time, the people of the Moke clan and the never-ending star field were healing and recuperating, because everyone knew that the foreign land and Sky River star field would make a comeback. And when the experts of the foreign land and Sky River star field made a comeback, it would be the day of the final battle. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was the Moke sword. After this sword had offended Xiao Linge, it had been chased by Xiao Linge. Seeing that Xiao Linge was still angry, Yi Xian had brought it out. The Moke sword. Looking at the sword in front of him, Yi Xian fell silent. The Moke force. He had experienced this kind of power before. It was very powerful and it felt so good. However, this power had always wanted to enslave him. This was a double-edged sword. At that moment, Little Soul's voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young master, this sword is not simple. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, how is it not simple? Little Soul said, this sword has its own source of power, and it seems to be endless. This kind of sword is extremely rare. In addition, the pair of eyes on the sword is a little strange. Yi Xian asked, strange? What do you mean? Little Soul said, I don't know, but it gives me a strange feeling. This sword should also be at the creation realm, and it should be at the Khanate creation realm. Yi Xian said in a low voice, even creation realm artifacts are divided into innate and acquired? Yes, the realm of creation is divided into 3 types. The first is the acquired realm of creation, which is man-made and has limited power. The second is the innate realm, which is a treasure of the realm of creation. It is not man-made, or rather, it is there in the first place, but in the later stages, it is man-made. For example, I absorbed the souls of the underworld race for tens of thousands of years and used them to condense my own soul. Finally, it was the body that the old master created for me. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The same goes for the Moke sword, right? More or less, Little Soul said. Yi Xian asked again, what about the third one? It's man-made, Little Soul said in a low voice. Yi Xian was stunned. Little Soul explained, some man-made creation realm treasures are even more powerful than creation realm treasures of Khanate existences. When a person reaches a certain level, they can indeed go against the heavens. Yi Xian looked at the Moke sword in front of him. He had to say that both this sword and the soul-suppressing sword were somewhat heaven-defying. The biggest problem was that this sword was somewhat different from Little Soul's. Little Soul took the initiative to recognize him as its master, but this sword had no intention of recognizing him as its master. Not only did it not want to recognize him as its master, but it wanted to enslave him. It was a very thoughtful sword. A moment later, Yi Xian put away the Moke sword and left the stone house. Yi Xian came to the valley where the Moke clan was. As soon as he arrived, a young man appeared in front of him. It was Wuxia. Wuxia glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Brother Yi, is there something you need? Yi Xian nodded. I want to see him. Wuxia naturally knew who Yi Xian was talking about and immediately nodded. Come with me. Soon, Yi Xian followed Wuxia to the top of a mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Xia, who was originally meditating, got up and walked in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and opened his right hand. The Moke sword appeared in his hand. Then he handed the sword to Xia. Xia looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, Yi Xian smiled. Returning it to its rightful owner. He, Yi Xian, was not a bandit. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. He would never take something that belonged to him, especially when it was lent to him by someone else. Shameless, there must be a bottom line. Xia reached out and held the sword. After a while, he handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian was puzzled. This? Xia said, this sword will only be buried in the Moke clan. It can only shine in your hands. Yi Xian said in a low voice, this is a creation realm treasure. Xia smiled. I know. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Next, the Moke clan will join forces with the never-ending starfield. Whether we can survive is another matter. Then he turned to look at the sky and said softly, the grudge between the Moke clan and the never-ending starfield. Then he shook his head. If we can't survive this time, all this will be meaningless. Yi Xian nodded. Brother Mo, there is something I don't understand. Why do the foreign region and the Sky River Starfield want to destroy the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield? To fight for territory? Xia said softly, something like that. Then he looked at the sky. There are many starfields nearby. The Sky River Starfield, the foreign region, the never-ending Starfield, the Spirit Void Starfield. Now, the only ones that can survive are the Spirit Void Starfield and the never-ending Starfield. The Spirit Void Starfield is the furthest from us. There are spatial turbulences around it. There is no way to set up a teleportation array there. Also, the Spirit Void Star Palace is powerful, so the never-ending Starfield is the best choice for everyone. Yi Xian said in a low voice, can't survive? The spirit chi is disappearing? Xia nodded. Every world has spirit chi. For example, the never-ending starfield has origin chi. However, this spirit chi is not endless. There will be a day when it is completely gone. Then, he turned to look at the burial wall and said softly, the spirit chi in the never-ending starfield can last for about 100 years. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Then he hesitated and said, "The Moke clan can live together with the never-ending starfield if they come to the never-ending starfield, right?" Xianxia smiled. "When the Moke clan first came here, we wanted to conquer the never-ending starfield and monopolize it. But the factions in the never-ending starfield will never allow any outside faction to encroach on their interests. So, there is no room for negotiation. Do you understand?" Xian was silent. Then, Xianxia looked at Xian. "If I call the shots for the Moke clan, I can lead the Moke clan to live in this starfield and everyone can live in peace. Do you agree?" Xian smiled bitterly. "You can call the shots for the Moke clan, but I can't call the shots for the never-ending starfield." Xianxia thought for a moment and said, "Fine. We can talk about this after this matter is over. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere." Then, he turned and walked into the distance. Zuoqing gestured for him to follow. Xian nodded slightly and followed. Soon, Xianxia brought Xian to an underground cave. After walking for about an hour, Xianxia finally stopped. At this moment, not far from the three of them, there was a stone platform. On the stone platform, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged. The middle-aged man's hair fell over his shoulders, and his hands were placed on his knees. There was not the slightest bit of aura coming from him. Xian asked, "This is?" Xianxia said softly, "The ancestor of the Moke clan was a swordsman. He was also the only swordsman in the Moke clan. After him, no one else has been able to control the Moke sword." Xian said, "Why did you bring me here?" Xianxia led Xian to the middle-aged man. Xian saw an ancient book in front of the middle-aged man. On the top of the book were 4 words, "Moke sword." Xianxia said softly, "This sword technique should not be buried here. Moreover, there is a way to control the Moke force. It should be very useful to you." As he spoke, he picked up the ancient book and handed it to Xian. "This is for you." Xian said in a low voice, "I still don't understand." Xianxia smiled. "You don't understand why I gave you the sword and this sword scroll. This chapter is not over. Please continue." "Technique?" Xian nodded. Xianxia said softly, "I am also doing this for the Moke clan." Xian looked at Xianxia. Xianxia smiled. "I only have one request. One day, you will be in charge of the never-ending star field. We will sit down and talk. A talk that doesn't involve fighting and no one dies. Is that okay?" Xian thought about it and nodded. But Xianxia nodded slightly and turned to leave. Zuoqing glanced at Xian and also turned to leave. Xian looked at the ancient book in his hand and fell silent. From Xianxia's words, he realized that Xianxia did not want war either. Indeed, if they continued fighting, more people would die. Of course, this was all in the future. Now, whether it was the Moke clan or the never-ending star field, everyone had to face the foreign land and Sky River star field. Whether they could survive was a problem. Xian collected his thoughts, turned around, and left with the scroll. On the mountain peak, as he watched Xian disappear into the distance, the hunchbacked elder behind Xianxia asked softly, "Is it worth it?" Xianxia smiled. "Patriarch, the Moke sword will only be gathering dust in our hands, won't it?" The hunchbacked elder said, "But it's still ours." Xianxia said softly, "We have a common enemy now." The hunchbacked elder asked, "And then?" Xianxia said, "We might die." The hunchbacked elder said, "We might also survive." Xianxia fell silent. The hunchbacked elder continued, "If he survives, he might be your enemy. Without him, the never-ending star field's younger generation will have no match for you. When that time comes, you will be the strongest of the younger generation in this star field." Xianxia smiled. "Patriarch, what's the point of being the strongest?" The hunchbacked old man looked at Xianxia. Xianxia smiled and said, "If we both survive, and I fight him again in the end, I will do everything in my power to kill him." With that, he turned and left. The hunchbacked elder looked at Xianxia's back. Gradually, a smile appeared on his face. How can the Moke clan not be happy to have such a son? With that, he disappeared. Xian returned to the Great Wall of Burial Sky. In the stone house, he looked at the Moke sword in his hand. As he stared, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned solemn. The Moke Sword. The Moke Sword gathered the Moke power in the Moke Sword and unleashed its strongest attack. Backlash. The Moke clan's ancestor did not suffer any backlash, but if he used it, he would. And it would be a huge backlash, because the backlash would be controlled by the Moke power and turn him into a sword slave. Before the Moke clan's ancestor, there were dozens of swordsmen who decided to be enslaved by the Moke power. In the stone house, Yi Xian thought for a moment and brought the Moke sword to the prison tower. The Moke sword began to tremble as if it was afraid of something. Yi Xian brought the Moke sword to the top of the tower. At that moment, the Moke sword began to tremble violently. Yi Xian glanced at the two swords in front of him and said, "Moke sword, I don't mean anything else. I just want to tell you, I have nothing to do with the two swords in front of you. Really, if you want to bite me, they won't kill you." The Moke sword. P.S. Brothers, is there anyone who knows how to make videos or draw pictures? I hope to make a short video of the sword domain with pictures of the characters. It's not for free and I'll pay for it. I hope to find someone to draw a few pictures of Tianming, the Unfettered One, Yang Yi, Snowy, Area, Xiao, and a few short videos. Are there any big shots who are skilled in such things? If there are, then contact me. I really don't want to be a freeloader. I'll pay as much as you want. Of course, don't screw me over. I'm not that rich. End of this chapter. Chapter 485. At the top of the tower, the Moke sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently. Yi Xian looked at the Moke sword and smiled. Don't be nervous. Really, I mean no harm. The Moke sword was speechless. Yi Xian looked at the two swords in front of him and said softly, "Don't worry, it won't hurt me." Then he looked at the Moke sword. Am I right? The Moke sword was speechless. Yi Xian turned to look at the two swords and smiled. Don't worry, I'll definitely be fine. After saying that, he walked down the tower with the Moke sword. Yi Xian returned to the first level with the Moke sword. He looked at the Moke sword in front of him. Don't worry, I won't enslave you. You and I are equal. However, the condition is that you don't harm me. Otherwise, I hope we can cooperate well. After saying that, he gripped the Moke sword tightly and began to chant something. Moke Mental Cultivation Method. This was a mental cultivation method created by the senior of the Moke clan. It could stabilize one's mind. About 15 minutes later, Yi Xian suddenly gripped the Moke sword. Soon, a powerful force gathered in his body. Moke power. When this force entered Yi Xian's body, he immediately became excited. Power. Once again, he felt that kind of tempting power as if it was endless. However, Yi Xian quickly calmed down. Power. This power was very tempting, but it was not his power. This was the power of the Moke sword. It did not belong to him. He could borrow this power, but he could not rely on it. Yi Xian guarded his mind and continued to absorb that power. Soon, more and more Moke power entered his body. Swell. This was what Yi Xian felt at that moment. He felt like his body was full of power. It was as if he could kill everything in a second. After a while, Yi Xian began to guide that power. During this process, he could feel that the Moke sword did not cause any trouble. However, he still did not dare to be careless. He was still very careful and made the soul-suppressing sword pay attention to the Moke sword at all times. If the Moku sword dared to mess around, he wouldn't show any mercy. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. The power on Yi Xian's body grew stronger and stronger. Roughly 2 hours later, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly opened, revealing 2 blood-red pupils. Eye of Moke. Yi Xian gripped his sword tightly in his right hand. In his eyes, there was a flash of sword light. At this moment, he finally realized that the source of the sword of Moke's power came from these eyes. Apart from the pupils, there was nothing special about the sword of Moke. However, the combination of the two and the mastery of the swordsman made the sword extremely powerful. The death of Moku. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Very quickly, he felt a series of scenes. A gloomy world, with dead people everywhere, and a pair of eyes looking down on everything in the dark. No, it should be said that it was devouring all the killing intent and resentment, Murder. Meanwhile, Yixian suddenly emanated a powerful murderous aura. At the same time, his eyes turned blood red. Murderous intent. Yixian felt that his mind was about to be controlled by this murderous intent. Sensing this, Yixian's expression changed drastically. He quickly said angrily, "Don't cause trouble for me." However, the murderous intent grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, the aura emanating from his body also grew stronger. Yixian was shocked because he realized that he was about to lose control of this power. Without any hesitation, he quickly sent the pair of eyes back into the Moku sword. Inside the Moku sword, boom! Yixian's entire body instantly collapsed to the ground like a deflated balloon. On the ground, Yixian panted heavily. His face was covered in cold sweat. In that instant, he actually wanted to kill someone. He wanted to kill anyone. Only when he thought of Yi Ling did that murderous intent weaken a little. However, his murderous intent was still strong. Thinking of this, Yixian suddenly sat up. His expression was somewhat fierce. At this moment, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Young master, this is not its fault." Yixian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Soul said in a low voice. "Young master, this is the nature of the Moku sword. If you want to control it, there are only two ways. The first is to obey it and be controlled by it. The second is to suppress it and make it under your control." Yixian said in a low voice, "Under my control?" Soul said, "Yes, young master can control it." Yixian asked, "How do I control it?" Soul said, "If you are not controlled by it and your mind is clear, you can control it. Because it is not deliberately targeting young master. Otherwise, with young master's current strength, it is absolutely impossible to suppress it. But I don't understand, why does it not target you, young master?" Yixian's expression was a little strange. Soon, he said seriously, "It must have seen my extraordinary talent, so it wants to follow me." Soul said, That's impossible, right?" Yixian's face was full of black lines. "So, what do you mean? What do you mean by impossible?" Soul giggled and did not say anything. Yixian. A moment later, Yixian sat cross-legged on the ground, looking at the Moku sword in front of him. There was only one way to conquer this sword, and that was not to be controlled by it. Fear still lingered in his heart from the scene just now. That murderous intent was too strong. He was afraid that he would be controlled by the murderous intent, and then do something that he would regret. Fear. Yixian's expression suddenly changed. He was actually afraid. He had never had this kind of thought before, and he was afraid of a sword. How could he be afraid? And he was afraid of a sword. Gradually, Yixian's expression became a little ugly. If he was afraid of a sword, how could he cultivate the sword? Thinking of this, Yixian suddenly gripped the Moku sword with both hands, and the next moment, endless Moku power gathered towards him. As more and more Moku power entered his body, Yixian's body gradually began to tremble, and that murderous intent appeared again. Not only that, but a pair of blood-red eyes appeared in his eye sockets. As this pair of blood-red eyes appeared, Yixian found that the murderous intent had begun to devour his mind. Yixian gritted his teeth. At this moment he no longer retreated, but faced this murderous intent head-on. The more he retreated, the more afraid he became. Yixian began to accept this murderous intent, but he still kept his mind clear. Leave a trace of clarity, and maintain his original heart. That was what he needed to do now. Time passed bit by bit, and the murderous intent around Yixian grew stronger. Not only that, but his expression also became more ferocious, like a demon. Beside him, Xiaoling looked at Yixian with a little fear. She hugged the god on the second floor next to her tightly, and pointed a small claw at Yixian, not knowing what to say. The god on the second floor looked at Yixian without saying anything. Just like that, about 4 hours later, Yixian's aura grew stronger, so strong that it had surpassed the Saint Realm. However, at this moment, the murderous intent around Yixian was also terrifying. Xiaoling looked at the god on the second floor, and the god said softly, "If he can endure it, he will be reborn. If he can't, then he can't blame anyone else. This is the path he chose. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. Yi Xian's aura was still growing stronger, but at the same time, the murderous intent was also growing stronger. This was not Yi Xian's murderous intent, but the murderous intent of Moku's puppet. Therefore, this murderous intent was not under Yi Xian's control. On the contrary, Yi Xian might even be controlled by this murderous intent. Now, it all depended on who was stronger, him or this murderous intent. The god on the second floor glanced at the fifth floor, and then looked at Yi Xian with a trace of worry in her eyes. Another 2 hours passed. At this time, Yi Xian's body began to tremble violently, as if he was having an epileptic fit. Seeing this scene, the god on the second floor frowned. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked towards her, and Xiao Ling hurriedly ran behind the god on the second floor. She covered her eyes with both hands, not daring to look at Yi Xian. The god on the second floor looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian walked in front of the god on the second floor and pointed his sword at her. The god on the second floor was expressionless. All of a sudden, Yi Xian thrust forward. The god on the second floor did not dodge, but the sword stopped half an inch away from the god's eyebrows. Yi Xian suddenly grinned. Just kidding. With that, he withdrew his sword. At this time, the god on the second floor suddenly pressed forward. The next moment, Yi Xian felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and then his whole body flew out. The god on the second floor walked towards Yi Xian. Kidding? I was also kidding. With that, her speed suddenly increased. Bang! Yi Xian flew out again. A moment later, Yi Xian sat on the ground with his back against the wall. The Moku sword was in front of him, and the god on the second floor was not far away. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He had brought this upon himself. The god on the second floor walked in front of Yi Xian. Have you subdued it? Yi Xian nodded slightly. But it's not very stable yet. The god on the second floor said, that power, after all, is not yours, understand? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. I will not rely too much on this power. With that, he looked at the god on the second floor. What is the attitude of the fifth floor? The god on the second floor was silent. Yi Xian said in a low voice, must he kill me? The god on the second floor shook his head. He wants the pagoda, and the pagoda is now at its weakest. Plus, the woman in the plain dress is not here, so now is the best time for him to take the pagoda. And if he wants the pagoda, you must die. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, there is no way to turn an enemy into a friend? The god on the second floor said calmly, why don't you go talk to him? Yi Xian shook his head. Beg him not to kill me? The god on the second floor was silent. Yi Xian said softly, how can I really control this pagoda? The god on the second floor looked at Yi Xian. Maybe never. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why? The god on the second floor glanced around. This pagoda is 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times more terrible than you think. It is still asleep and has not shown its ferocious side. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. Jian Zizai gave up this pagoda because she knew that she could not control this pagoda. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, why did she choose me? Just because I am excellent? Just because I am different? Just because I... The god on the second floor suddenly punched out. Bang! Yi Xian flew out directly. The god on the second floor glanced at the flying Yi Xian and shook her head. I can't stand it. Chapter 486. After a while, Yi Xian leaned against the wall. At this moment he was speechless. What kind of temper did this second floor almighty have? Attacking at the slightest provocation was simply inhumane. The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. You have to understand that this prison pagoda might not truly submit to you. Yi Xian looked at the second floor almighty. The second floor almighty said softly, the reason why it recognizes you as its master is most likely because of the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman can suppress these existences here. Moreover, it should be afraid of the plain-dressed woman. Submitting to you will allow it to gain the approval and support of the plain-dressed woman. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This feeling is very uncomfortable. The second floor Almighty looked at Yi Xian. What's uncomfortable about it? Yi Xian shook his head. All along, I thought it chose me because it liked me. The second floor Almighty said, actually, this is also a possibility. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. These are not important. What is important is that you have to understand one thing. It is stronger than you, much stronger. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. However, I have no choice, right? The second floor Almighty was silent. Did Yi Xian have a choice? In fact, he had no choice. Choose not to take the prison pagoda? The problem was that the prison pagoda had found him, not that he had chosen the prison pagoda. The second floor Almighty shook her head. At this moment, she suddenly felt a little lost. Because in the unseen world, many things seemed to have been predestined. Yi Xian suddenly stood up and smiled. Actually, I should thank it. The second floor Almighty looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Because it has brought me many benefits. For example, you, the Space Dao Law, the Grand Dao Law, and Miss Jian. And you all have helped me. And that sword that left. I can't only see the disadvantages, can I? The second floor Almighty nodded. It's good that you have such a mentality. Yi Xian looked up at the fifth floor. As for the fifth floor, as he spoke, he looked at the Almighty on the second floor. If I didn't have the help of the plain-dressed girl, I wouldn't have any chance of winning? The Almighty on the second floor didn't say anything. Yi Xian asked again, why isn't the fifth floor making a move yet? The great god on the second floor said, it's because of that sword. But soon, the other party will make a move. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. I can feel that it won't take more than 5 days. 5 days? Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. With that, he left the World Prison Pagoda. After Yi Xian left, the Almighty came to the fourth floor. She walked to the entrance to the fifth floor. Can't we talk? After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps suddenly rang out from the fifth floor. The face of the god on the second floor changed drastically. After a few breaths, blood slowly flowed from the corner of the second floor god's mouth. At the same time, a chuckle sounded from the fifth floor. Talk? What right does an ant have to talk to me? As the voice fell, the footsteps began to move towards the entrance. At this moment, above the top of the pagoda, a sword suddenly flew down. The next moment, the sword directly entered the fifth floor. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out from the fifth floor. A moment later, the sword left the fifth floor and returned to the top of the pagoda. In the fifth floor, a voice suddenly sounded. The sword is not bad, but I don't know how the owner of the sword is. The Almighty on the second floor looked at the fifth floor. You should be able to see it. The Almighty on the fifth floor laughed. The sword has left this pagoda. I think it's going to find its owner. I hope its owner isn't too weak. Otherwise, when I come out, it will be a lot less fun. The face of the Almighty on the second floor darkened. The fifth floor was actually waiting for the owner of the sword. Was this arrogance? Arrogance? Or confidence? At this moment, she thought of Jian Zizi. This woman was the best fighter in the Protoss. And she had personally experienced the strength of this woman. However, the other party could only be locked up on the fourth floor. The strength of the fifth floor was definitely above Jian Zizi. After a moment, the Almighty on the second floor turned and left. After Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda, he came to the mountain range where he used to cultivate. In the dense forest, Yi Xian walked slowly. In the dense forest, a light breeze blew, a little chilly. From Qingqing until now, he had experienced a lot and seen a lot. Now, he was no longer naive and only wanted to live a peaceful life. In this kind of world, a peaceful life was undoubtedly courting death. Because one day, the whole world might suddenly be destroyed. Yi Xian looked up at the sky. At this moment, what he could see in the sky was a huge star net. The other world. The Sky River sector. The fifth floor. These people all wanted him dead. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Unknowingly, he had fallen into a desperate situation again. No, from Qingqing until now, his situation had never been good. Survival. Yi Xian continued to walk forward. He found that he could no longer think about swordsmanship or martial arts. What he needed to do now was to live well. If he died, what would happen to his sister? What would happen to his mother? At this thought, Yi Xian's expression gradually became somewhat sinister. But he had to live well. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. Immortal Spirit Sword. Yi Xian held the sword and pointed it at the ground. Soon, two kinds of sword intents suddenly appeared around him. One black and one white, one good and one evil. Good? Evil. He had never particularly understood good and evil, because in the world, good and evil were often decided by the strong. The winner was king, and the loser was a bandit. The emperors of the world, as long as they were defeated, they were bandits. As long as they were victorious, no matter how evil they could also become good. Good and evil were determined by one's fist. But was that really the case? Perhaps so, but in his opinion, good and evil were in the human heart. Good was good, and evil was evil. Good and evil were determined by one's heart, not by others. He protected his sister, protected his mother, fought for himself, and fought for the never-ending starfield. That was good. At this thought, the sword intent of kindness in front of Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a sword light and shot into the sky. In the void, the sword intent turned into sword light and circled continuously. On top of the Great Wall of Heaven Burial Wall, Wei Yang Tian looked up at the wisp of sword intent above the mountain range, deep in thought. Beside her was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, "His sword intent?" Wei Yang Tian nodded. Mr. Bai thought for a moment, then said, "I underestimated him." Wei Yang Tian looked at the distant horizon, and in her mind, that scene from back then. That scene that she could not forget. In the dense forest, the sword intent in the sky transformed into a pure white sword and flew back to Yi Xian. It floated quietly in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent. Kindness. The kindness of the woman in the plain dress could change mountains and rivers with a single thought. Because of her powerful strength, she could determine the life and death of all things with a single thought. The kindness and evil of the woman in the plain dress transcended herself and the great Tao. He was far from being able to do that, so there was no need for him to learn from the woman in the plain dress. His kindness was to live well, protect his sister, protect his mother, and protect everything he wanted to protect. It was that simple. At this thought, Yi Xian reached out with his left hand and grasped the pure white sword. The pure white sword trembled slightly and suddenly disappeared. But in the next moment, the sword reappeared 100 zhang away. It did not travel through space, but wherever his kindness went, the sword would go. The sword of kindness was born from the heart and condensed from thoughts. It was not restricted by space and was not trapped by heaven and earth. What was evil? Was killing evil? What about killing those who deserved to be killed? Whether it was good or evil, it was determined by one's heart. He would not kill those who should not be killed, but he would kill those who deserved to be killed, and he would kill them ruthlessly. Good and evil were determined, and the heart and mind were connected. Two swords suddenly flew out in front of Yi Xian. They were swords condensed from the sword of kindness and evil. Different from the sword of Qi, they were not restricted by space and could appear anywhere he wanted. Compared to the sword of Qi, they were even more mysterious. The two swords represented his way of the sword. At this moment, the two swords suddenly returned to him. Yi Xian took out the moke sword. In the next moment, the two swords transformed into one black and 100 white sword rays that entered the moke sword. Yi Xian held the moke sword in his hand. Endless moke power entered his body. About an hour later, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. After the good and evil sword intents were suppressed, the killing intent could no longer affect him. Not only that, but even the moke power could be suppressed by his sword intent. The sword of kindness and evil could suppress the killing intent. It was not over yet. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and waved his right hand. 9 saint-grade swords appeared in front of him. In the next moment, he picked up a sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. He began to madly absorb the energy of the swords. Cultivate. Become stronger. This was his current goal. As one sword after another was devoured by Yi Xian, the aura emanating from his body quickly grew stronger and stronger. The painter came to a mountain. This mountain towered in the clouds. Above the clouds, cranes flew by from time to time. It was like a fairyland. The painter walked to a large hall. At this moment, a white-haired woman appeared in front of him. The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "What are you doing here?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, The white-haired woman shook her head. "From the moment you left the Xian gate, we were no longer senior sister and junior sister." The painter smiled. "Senior sister, you have known me since I was young. You know that I have no desire for the position of Xian Gate Sect Master. Making me the Sect Master is the same as taking my life." The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "Do you not want to be the Sect Master, or do you not want to compete with me?" The painter said softly, "In my heart, you will always be that senior sister who took care of me since I was young. No matter what, it is not as important as you." The white-haired woman looked at the painter. After a moment, her eyes became somewhat complicated. "You are the most outstanding genius of our Xian Gate. If you become the Sect Master, Xian Gate will definitely prosper." The painter shook his head. "I am too lazy. I do not like these trivial matters. If I do it, Xian Gate will only be a mess. With senior sister here, Xian Gate will become better. In fact, Xian Gate will also be better than before." The white-haired woman said softly, "Are you praising me?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, this time I came to ask for your help." The white-haired woman asked, "Never-ending star field?" The painter nodded. The white-haired woman was silent. The painter asked, "What is it?" The white-haired woman opened her palm. A sword of order was in her hand. Seeing this sword of order, the painter's face instantly darkened. The white-haired woman looked up at the horizon and said softly, 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 mutant sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights. Who can stop them?" As she spoke, she looked at the painter. "Leave never-ending star field." The painter was silent. "P.S. My hope in this lifetime is if Sword Domain can be made into an animation, that would be great. However, it is also difficult. I heard that making an animation is even more expensive than a television series." Chapter 487. Leave the never-ending starfield. The painter fell silent. In front of the painter, the white-haired woman said softly, "The never-ending starfield can't stop them." The painter smiled. "But we can't just give up like this, right?" The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "You should know that if you stay, you will only be sending yourself to death." The painter said softly, "Perhaps." With that, she turned and left. The white-haired woman suddenly said, "Master." The painter didn't stop. She continued walking forward. She couldn't speak anymore, because if the Mystic Gate joined in, it would only be a meaningless sacrifice. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of the painter. Her clothes were as white as snow, untainted by a speck of dust. The white-haired woman was stunned. "Little Un." The woman in front of her was Xianxia. The painter sized up Xianxia and said with a smile, "Senior sister, I heard that a very good genius appeared in our Mystic Gate. Is it her?" The white-haired woman nodded. "Yes." The painter smiled. Not bad at all." And Xianxia looked straight at the painter. "I will go with you." The painter was stunned. The white-haired woman frowned. "Little N." And Xianxia looked at the white-haired woman and said softly, "Sect Master, he and I are friends." The white-haired woman said in a low voice, "Do you know what he is facing now?" And Xianxia said, "Then all the more I should go." The white-haired woman stared at Xianxia. "You are not allowed." And Xianxia shook her head. "You can't stop me." The white-haired woman was about to attack when the painter suddenly said, "Senior sister, let her go with me." The white-haired woman looked at the painter and frowned. "Are you crazy?" The painter smiled. Senior sister, she should experience such a great battle. I know what senior sister is worried about. I will guarantee senior sister that she will be safe. Is that all right? The white-haired woman glanced at Xianxia. You must go. Xianxia nodded. The white-haired woman sighed softly and waved her right hand. A seal that seemed to be cast from ice appeared in front of Xianxia. Xianxia was stunned, puzzled. The painter smiled. The mystic ice seal, my mystic gate's most precious treasure, accept it. Xianxia accepted the mystic ice seal and bowed to the white-haired woman. The white-haired woman looked at the two of them. Come back safely. The artist nodded. I will do my best. As soon as she finished speaking, she brought Xianxia along and vanished on the spot. After the two of them left, an old man appeared behind the white-haired woman, and the old man said in a low voice, Sect Master, you shouldn't have let that girl leave. The white-haired woman shook her head. Xiao is very stubborn. We can't change her mind. The old man said, she is our most outstanding genius. The white-haired woman said softly, that's why we can't keep them in captivity. As she spoke, she looked up at the horizon. The star enforcers. How can the never-ending star domain stop them? A man sat cross-legged on the peak of a mountain. His eyes were slightly closed, as if he had entered a meditative state. This person was Xie. Not far behind Xie was the hunchbacked old man. When the sky darkened, Xie, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly stood up. In the next moment, a powerful aura swept out from his body, but very quickly, this aura disappeared. The hunchbacked elder asked, You broke through? Xie nodded slightly. At that moment, he had reached the creation realm from the sage realm. In terms of realm, it could be said that he was among the top experts on this continent. Xie looked up at the starry sky. In the starry sky, the star web was still there. The hunchbacked elder suddenly said, No matter what, you must live. You are the hope. Xie shook his head. The Mo clan has no deserters. I can be the last to die, but I will never be the last to live. As he spoke, he looked at the hunchbacked elder. Patriarch, take me to the ancestors. The hunchbacked elder hesitated, then nodded. But soon, the two of them disappeared. In the mountain range of the Great Wall of Burial Sky, Xian had already devoured all the swords. At that moment, he was very calm, and the aura emitted from his body was also very calm. Not far to the right of Xian, Wanli leaned against a large tree with her arms crossed. She looked at Xian, and beside her was Xiao Ling. This little guy would often come out for a stroll now. After an unknown period of time, Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there was a pair of blood-red pupils. The Moke eye. Now, he had already used this pair of pupils as his own eyes. For the time being, it was not bad. Not far away, Wanli suddenly said, What realm? Xian looked at Wanli. Ethereal opening. Wanli frowned slightly. But Xian smiled. I cultivate in adversity. I walk through every realm again. Wanli walked in front of Xian. Cultivate in adversity? Xian nodded, then explained to Wanli. After a while, Wanli asked curiously, How does it feel to cultivate like this? Xian said softly, Walking through it again, there will be many new discoveries. Wanli smiled. Xian smiled. What do you think after the incident? Wanli said, What if we both die? Xian said softly, Then it's a draw. Wanli thought about it and said, Sure. Xian looked up at the sky. The star web was still there. After a moment of silence, Xian suddenly smiled. I don't like to sit around and wait for death. As he spoke, he looked at Wanli. Do something? The corners of Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. That's exactly what I want. Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky, and Wanli followed closely behind. It didn't take long for Xian to arrive before the star web. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Xian. This person was the divine mage, Yen Sheng. Sheng stared at Yi Xian and was about to speak when his expression changed drastically. In the next moment he pressed his hands together, and a powerful flame swept out from his body. At the same time, he forcefully dodged to the side. An instant later, Sheng appeared 300 m to the right. However, his arms were gone. Moreover, they were falling slowly to the ground where he stood just now. Sheng stared fixedly at Yi Xian with a trace of fear in his eyes. In that instant just now, he'd instinctively sensed danger. However, he hadn't seen how Yi Xian had attacked. Moreover, he hadn't seen how the sword had vanished as well. That sword was like a ghost. If he'd been just a little slower, even just a little, then he would have lost his life. Sheng gazed at Yi Xian with extreme terror in his heart. When did Yi Xian's strength become so terrifying? Yi Xian gazed at Sheng. The latter's expression changed, and he moved 300 m back once more. Yi Xian said in his heart, "What a pity." Just now, he'd intended to take Sheng by surprise. Unfortunately, Sheng was too strong and reacted too quickly. Even if he'd suddenly attacked, Sheng was actually able to react in time. Fortunately, chopping off Sheng's arms was still a gain. As Yi Xian walked towards Sheng, two red-robed old men suddenly appeared behind the ladder. Two divine wizards. Yi Xian stopped and said, "Don't be like this. Let's fight one-on-one." Sheng gazed at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, I have to say that you've indeed given the old man a huge surprise. However, you don't know that the more monstrous you are, the more we won't let you off." Yi Xian shook his head. "Would you let me off if I wasn't a monstrous genius? Don't talk nonsense." As he spoke, he pointed his sword at the old man. "One-on-one. If you're a man, let's fight one-on-one." Sheng sneered. "One-on-one? You're so naive. Kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, the two behind him formed seals with their hands and started to chant incantations. Right at this moment, two swords suddenly appeared before them. One of the swords was white and the other black, and they appeared without any warning. The expressions of the two divine wizards changed drastically. At this moment, they didn't even have time to chant any incantations, and they turned around and flashed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and Wanli suddenly vanished on the spot. Nearby, Sheng's expression changed drastically because Yi Xian was coming for him. Without any hesitation, Sheng stomped his right foot lightly. Sheng vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already behind the star web. However, at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed at the other divine wizard. The divine wizard formed hand seals with both hands and was just about to chant an incantation when two swords silently appeared in front of him again and slashed down at him. The divine wizard's expression changed drastically, and he didn't dare to continue chanting an incantation. He immediately flashed and retreated. However, the two swords were like maggots on a bone, and they chased after him closely. They were even faster than him, and he didn't have time to chant an incantation. At this moment, the divine wizard was horrified. The main reason was that Yi Xian's swords were too fast, and he would be pierced through the chest if he was the slightest bit careless. Therefore, he couldn't use any secret techniques at all. With this retreat, the divine wizard retreated into the star web. However, as soon as he retreated into the star web, a miserable scream resounded from outside the star web. Sheng and the divine wizard turned to look outside, and they saw a bloody head slowly falling from the sky. Sheng and the divine wizard's expressions instantly turned extremely ugly when they saw this scene. At this moment, they realized that Yi Xian's real target wasn't them, but the other divine wizard that was being held back by Wanli. Yi Xian and Wanli had actually killed a divine wizard in an instant. In the distance, beside Yi Xian, Wanli glanced at the falling head below. If they can't use their secret techniques, so weak. Yi Xian nodded slightly. At this moment, he also realized that although these divine wizards were very powerful, they also had a fatal weakness, and that was that they couldn't get close to them. To be more precise, as long as they weren't allowed to cast spells, they were as weak as chickens. However, the prerequisite was that the flying swords had to be fast enough to prevent these people from using their secret techniques. Once these people used their secret techniques, it would really be a little too destructive. Yi Xian walked in front of the star web and looked at Yan Sheng and the others. Didn't you want that treasure? Come out. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian. You're very arrogant. Yi Xian grinned. I'm arrogant, come out and hit me. Lian Wanli, Yan Sheng stared at Yi Xian. Come in. Yi Xian said, come out. Yan Sheng said calmly, aren't you very powerful? Come in. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile and turned to leave. However, when he turned around, he suddenly coughed violently. Not only that, but he also bent his waist, but he quickly straightened it. Seeing this scene, Yan Sheng frowned slightly. The next moment he seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, stop him, he's suffering from a backlash. Behind Yan Sheng, the divine wizard hurriedly rushed out. However, as soon as he came out of the star web, 2 swords silently appeared behind him. At the same time, an azure dragon saber appeared in front of him. The god mage's eyes were wide open, filled with sorrow and despair. He knew that he was finished, because he realized that Yi Xian had long planned this. This time, not only was he caught off guard, but he was also tricked by Yi Xian. An instant later, the divine wizard who had just come out was directly beheaded. Yan Sheng, who was about to come out, froze in place. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly clutched his stomach. Ouch, I'm suffering from a backlash. I'm suffering from a backlash. Come and hit me. Yan Sheng. Chapter 488. Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. You're asking for a beating. Yi Xian laughed, then turned to look at Yan Sheng, whose expression was extremely ugly. The strongest of the foreign domain? Justice of Pa. After saying that, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lian Wanli glanced at Yan Sheng and said apologetically, sorry, he's a straightforward person and likes to speak the truth. Please don't mind him. After saying that, she turned and floated away. Yan Sheng suddenly roared, his whole body trembling with anger. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed. The next moment he suddenly detonated his body. Boom! Yan Sheng's body collapsed, but his soul had already appeared hundreds of feet away. And there stood a person where Yan Sheng had been standing. This person was Yi Xian, who had previously left. Yi Xian looked up at Yan Sheng, who was not far away. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. How could you pass through the star web without a sound? At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into the soul-suppressing sword. The next moment, he held the sword and pointed at Yan Sheng. Soul separation. As soon as he said that, Yan Sheng in the distance was instantly horrified. He frantically retreated, but in the process of retreating, his soul actually disintegrated bit by bit. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. Yi Xian waved his sword, and Yan Sheng's soul immediately turned into a black light and was absorbed by Little Soul. After a moment, Little Soul's excited voice sounded. What a powerful soul! Young Lord, I want more. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. You want more? What do you think this is? A cabbage? Little Soul said excitedly, Young Lord, this is a great supplement. After I devour it, I can quickly recover. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If there's a chance, I'll definitely let you absorb more. Little Soul hurriedly said, Thank you, young lord. I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and go into a sea of flames for young lord, even if I die 10,000 times. Yi Xian's expression froze. After a long time, he shook his head. So you're like this, Little Soul? Xiaohun. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing not far away. Celestial Venerable, the painter who had fought against endless heaven. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian used the Space Dao Law to retreat out of Star Web. The Empyrean looked at Yi Xian. You really surprise me. Needless to say, Yi Xian killing 3 divine mages by himself was a bit too exaggerated. Of course, this was an exaggeration. If Yan Sheng hadn't underestimated Yi Xian in the beginning and hadn't guarded against Yi Xian wouldn't have been able to cut off Yan Sheng's arms in an instant. With 3 divine wizards working together, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to resist them at all. However, these 3 people were defeated by Yi Xian one by one. Yi Xian took one look at the Empyrean, then turned to leave. However, to his surprise, the Empyrean had no intention of attacking at all. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman appeared where Yi Xian had been standing. The newcomer was none other than Endless Sky. The Empyrean looked at Endless Heaven. "Palace Master Endless, you don't know who you're fighting." Endless Heaven said calmly, "And then?" The Empyrean smiled slightly, then turned to leave. Endless Heaven glanced at the starry sky behind Star Web. In the depths of the starry sky, she could vaguely see teleportation arrays. Teleportation arrays. She knew very well what this meant. A moment later, Endless Heaven turned to leave. Burial Sky Great Wall. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. In a stone house, the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield powerhouses were all there. Yi Xian and Xianxia were there as well. Inside the stone house, Wei Yang Tian said softly, "I've already received news that there are 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 special sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights, and 19 saint-rank demonic beasts participating in the encirclement." The hunchbacked old man's face gradually darkened when he heard that. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Saint-rank mercenary groups?" Endless Heaven looked at Yi Xian. In the starry sky, there are some forces formed by people that specialize in killing and robbing people. A mercenary group that can reach the saint rank means that they have at least one creation realm powerhouse, and the rest are at least at the saint rank. As for the mutant sorcerers, they belong to the same sect as the god sorcerers. However, these mutant sorcerers like to play dirty, and their methods are slightly different. Speaking up to this point, she paused for a moment and continued, "These saint knights should have been trained by the Keeper of Order. Every single one of them is a peak saint knight. Moreover, their combat strength is extremely strong, the kind that doesn't need to be exaggerated." Hearing that, everyone suddenly quieted down. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and said softly, "Do we have any other choice?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "For us, we have no other choice. So, what we can do is to fight to the death. As for the others, we are going to die anyway, but before we die, we must drag down as many scapegoats as possible." Everyone looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said again, "There is no other choice. Isn't that right?" Endless Heaven nodded slightly. "For us, there is no other choice now. If we win this battle, everyone will live, but if we die..." At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. Then as she said, "Drag more scapegoats with us." The hunchbacked old man nodded. "Fight. Fight to the last person. Fight." In the entire stone house, no one said anything about surrendering or negotiating, because this was simply impossible. Yi Xian left the stone house. At this moment, Xianxia followed him out. The two of them walked down the Great Wall. Xianxia said, "You can already control that sword?" Yi Xian nodded. Xianxia smiled lightly. "As expected, it is still suitable for you." Yi Xian said softly, "Thank you." Xianxia looked up at the starry sky. "Do you think we will win?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "No." Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, "The more afraid we are of losing, the more likely we will lose. The more afraid we are of dying, the more likely we will die." Xianxia smiled slightly. "Indeed. Put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn." Yi Xian stopped and said softly, "Put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn." Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian. "I hope everyone can survive." After saying this, he turned around and left. Staying where he was, Yi Xian kept walking forward after a moment of silence. But who didn't want to live? Yi Xian also wanted to live. But at this moment, he could feel how powerful the enemy was. Not only the enemy outside, but also the 5th floor of the prison pagoda. Prison pagoda. This pagoda brought him an opportunity, but at the same time, it was also a great disaster. As the plain-dressed woman said, Possessing this prison pagoda was a blessing and a curse to him. The plain-dressed woman. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the plain-dressed woman. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. The appointment in the clouds. When the plain-dressed woman disappeared for the last time, she made a promise with him to meet in the clouds. This chapter is not finished, please continue. Actually, he also wanted to see her. Was there still a chance? Yi Xian looked up at the horizon. He was at a loss. Time passed bit by bit. At the end of the night, a smear of white appeared on the horizon. Soon, a red sun appeared on the horizon. At this moment, the star web covering the Great Wall suddenly disappeared. A man appeared in the sky above the Great Wall. The Celestial Venerable. The Celestial Venerable looked down. Anyone from the never-ending Starfield or the Moke clan will be spared if they surrender. Spared if they surrender. With the help of mystic energy, this sentence quickly spread throughout the Great Wall. At this moment, Wei Yangtian appeared in front of the Celestial Venerable. Wei Yangtian looked at the Celestial Venerable. Don't waste your breath. The Celestial Venerable sneered. Wei Yangtian, since you want to die, we will fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, 72 powerhouses on black flaming horses suddenly swooped down. The people on these flaming horses were all sage powerhouses. Sage knights. 72 people swooped down. Their might was like that of a magnificent army with thousands of horses and men. Everyone felt a strong sense of oppression. Wei Yangtian suddenly said, Wei Yang guards. As soon as he finished speaking, 16 Wei Yang guards, led by a Gui, suddenly appeared behind him. At this moment, the hunchbacked elder suddenly said, General Mo Ku. As soon as he finished speaking, 9 General Mo Ku appeared behind the hunchbacked elder. Wei Yangtian said softly, Kill. With a sickle in hand, a Gui led the 16 Wei Yang guards into the sky. The 9 General Mo Ku of the Moke clan also charged out. 25 people against 72 people. In terms of momentum, the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan did not lose to the 72 Sage Knights at all. The Celestial Venerable glanced at the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku. He had to admit that these people were very strong. However, could 20 people really fight against 72 people? As soon as the battle began, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were suppressed. The Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were very strong because they were experts carefully nurtured by the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan. However, these Sage Knights were not weak either, especially when it came to numbers. Therefore, as soon as the two sides clashed, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku of the Moke clan were suppressed. Seeing this, the Celestial Venerable smiled. He looked at Wei Yangtian. Attack! As soon as he said that, a group of people suddenly charged down from the sky. There were not many people, only about 40 to 50. These people all charged down in groups. They were obviously the Sage Realm Mercenary Corps. And these people were all sages. At this moment, Sage Realm experts were walking around like dogs. Although there were so many sages this time, it did not mean that sages were cabbages. On the contrary, sages were still very rare in this starfield. There were so many of them here because the Keeper of Order had basically gathered all the sages here. If they were scattered, each starfield would at most have 10 to 20 sages. Below, Wei Yangtian looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai nodded slightly. Soon, he led Li Zhangfeng and the others into the sky, heading straight for the Mercenary Corps. The current head of the Moke clan, Mo Kuchi, also led a few Desolate clan experts and charged out. In the sky, the Celestial Venerable looked down and saw Mo Xie, Zuoqing, and the others. However, he did not see Yi Xian. He frowned and scanned the area below. He still did not see Yi Xian. As if remembering something, the Celestial Venerable's expression changed. Yi Xian is gone. He's going to set us up. P.S. My gums have been inflamed recently. It's painful. End of this chapter. Chapter 489. As soon as the Heavenly Venerable finished speaking, 2 rays of sword light slashed through the mercenary group a few thousand meters away. It was extremely fast. Two of the Saint Realm experts didn't even have time to react before their heads flew into the air. At practically the exact same moment, another two heads flew into the air over 30 meters away. The Heavenly Exalt's face fell when he saw this, and he was about to make a move. However, Never-Ending Heaven suddenly made a move. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the Heavenly Venerable instantly retreated 300 meters. By the time he stopped, more than a dozen of the mercenaries had died. All of them had been instantly killed. Moreover, more were dying incessantly. The Heavenly Venerable turned to look at the starry sky. Attack! As soon as he finished speaking, an afterimage shot down from the sky. In the dark below, Yi Xian, who was about to launch an attack, frowned slightly. Then he stepped back. As soon as he stepped back, the space where he had been suddenly exploded. Yi Xian looked in front of him. A man in black had suddenly appeared there, and the man held a dagger in his hand. He could sense that the man in black was looking at him. The man in black was able to notice him. Right at this moment, the man in black suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Mo Xie suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Mo Xie punched forward. Rumble! The man in black returned to where he was before. Mo Xie said, "Continue. I'll deal with him." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot lightly. Boom! Space trembled slightly, and he vanished on the spot. The man in black held the dagger tightly in his right hand, and his body gradually turned illusory. In the next moment, numerous afterimages flashed towards Mo Xie from all directions. Seeing this scene, Mo Xie narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, he suddenly slammed his palm in front of him. Rumble! The space within 100 meters suddenly shook violently. Immediately after, a powerful force spread outwards with Mo Xie at the center. At the same time, a black figure was forced back by this force. It was the man in black. The man in black suddenly stomped his right foot and used the power of space to stop himself. However, he just stopped when two swords appeared soundlessly. The swords pierced through the man's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Mo Xie turned her head and looked around, but she didn't see Yi Xian. But right at this moment, a series of screams rang out incessantly from the mercenary group on the right. Instant kill. The group of mercenaries fighting with Mr. Bai and the others could be said to be frightened out of their wits at this moment because they did not discover who was secretly attacking them. The two flying swords were really too elusive. There was nowhere to hide. Soon, the group of mercenaries retreated as they fought. Not only did they have to face Mr. Bai and the other powerhouses, but they also had to guard against the people who attacked them from the shadows. The people who attacked them from the shadows took up too much of their energy. Many people already had thoughts of retreating. At this time, the Heavenly Venerate fighting Never-Ending Heaven suddenly looked up into the depths of the starry sky and roared, "What are you waiting for?" In the starry sky, a purple-robed old man looked down. The purple-robed old man was expressionless, and behind him was a dense black army. After a short moment, the purple-robed old man said softly, "Kill." With that, countless soldiers swooped down from the starry sky. Among this army there were human powerhouses, demonic beasts, and some oceanic species great demons. Their numbers were several times that of the Moke clan and Never-Ending Star Field. As he charged down, the sky darkened in an instant. In the sky below, Mo Xie looked up at the dense black army and said softly, "All members of the Moke clan, listen up. Fight to the last man." With that, he directly leaped onto the evil Qilin's back, and the next moment he rode the evil Qilin and soared into the sky. Behind him were countless Moke clan powerhouses. Fight! Countless angry roars soared into the sky, shaking the horizon. On the other side, Shui Bai held a long spear in his hand and looked up at the horizon. The next moment, he pointed his spear at the horizon. Fight! With that, Shui Bai and Zhou Shengsheng soared into the sky, and behind them, countless Never-Ending Star Field powerhouses followed closely. Fight! No one had the slightest bit of fear. They could only fight. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man looked down. Among the mercenary groups, powerhouses were still being killed instantly. The purple-robed old man turned to look beside him. Can we restrain him? With that, 3 old men appeared beside the purple-robed old man. The 3 old men all wore gray robes and held black staffs in their hands. Divergent sorcerers. The 3 of them looked down. After a moment, the leading divergent sorcerer said softly, "Give us some time." The purple-robed old man nodded. Soon, the 3 divergent sorcerers began chanting incantations. Gradually, the space around them began to tremble. At the same time, 3 mysterious forces followed the space and spread downwards. The purple-robed old man looked down, his eyes searching for one person. That was the painter. But he hadn't seen this painter yet. This painter was as terrifying as Wei Yangtian. After a moment of silence, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Attack!" With that, 6 powerhouses appeared behind him. These 6 people were very different from humans. They were much taller than humans. Demon Lord. The 6 of them were all Creation Realm powerhouses, and they were all at the peak of the Creation Realm. In the next moment, the 6 of them charged downwards. Below, Wei Yangtian suddenly looked up into the sky. When she saw the 6 of them, she frowned slightly. Who would stop them? At this moment, a woman appeared before the 6 of them. Painter. The painter stared coldly at the 6 of them. The 6 of them charged towards the painter. 6 against 1. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man relaxed when he saw the painter appear. It was fine as long as the painter appeared. He turned to look at the 3 divergent sorcerers. At this moment, the leading divergent sorcerer suddenly made a seal downwards. Void seal appear. As soon as the voice fell, the space below suddenly trembled violently. Yi Xian, who was in the dark, suddenly had a drastic change of expression. He hurriedly retreated, and the space he was retreating to suddenly ignited. After a moment, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, in the space above his head, there was a black flame floating. That flame was right above his head. At this moment, although he was still in the space, that flame was following him. The current him was no different from not hiding at all. Yi Xian raised his head. In the sky, the 3 divergent sorcerers were watching him. Beside the 3 divergent sorcerers, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Kill him." The leading divergent sorcerer took out a black mirror and began to silently chant, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, Universe Reconstruction, Seal." With that, he pointed his finger at Yi Xian. Below, the space around Yi Xian suddenly froze and began to search layer by layer. Seeing this, the purple-robed old man's expression changed. "Don't use spatial techniques." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian went back to normal. Seeing this scene, the 3 of them immediately frowned. They looked at the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man said in a deep voice, "Spatial techniques are useless against this guy. Change to a secret technique." The leading old man nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and quickly made a gesture with both hands. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian began to heat up. In the starry sky, the divergent sorcerer formed a seal with both hands and silently chanted, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, for symbols Secret Technique, Absolute Blaze." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian suddenly ignited. Yi Xian slashed with his sword. A ray of light flashed, but it was directly incinerated by the flames. At the same time, Yi Xian noticed that his body seemed to be on fire. Yi Xian frowned slightly. These geezers have some ability. He didn't dare be careless. The sword in his hand transformed into the sword of Moke. In the next moment, a powerful force converged towards his body like a tide. Moke energy. A short moment later, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot with his sword in hand. A ray of light flashed, and everywhere it passed, it tore through everything. Even the flames were torn apart. After charging out of the flames, Yi Xian didn't deal with the 3 divergent sorcerers, because he knew that he couldn't get close to them at such a distance. Moreover, there was a purple-robed old man by their side. So, he was very clearly aware that he couldn't get close to the 3 divergent sorcerers. So, his objective right now was to help Ague and the others deal with the Saint Realm Knights. Because Ague and the others were being steadily pushed back. The expression of the old man changed when he saw Yi Xian charge towards the Saint Realm Knights. His figure shook, and he shot through space to arrive in front of Yi Xian. After that, he suddenly clawed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force shrouding him as soon as the palm touched him. This force was so oppressive that he could hardly breathe. Yi Xian naturally didn't dare act carelessly when facing the old man, and he immediately took his sword in both hands and slashed it forward. A single strike of his sword was enhanced by 2 types of sword intent. Bang! As the sword slashed down, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, the purple-robed old man in front of him was also forced to retreat over 100 feet. The old man glanced at his right hand. At this moment, his right arm had split apart like a spiderweb. The old man's face fell, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian. "What sort of monstrous genius are you?" At this moment, he was extremely astounded because he hadn't expected that he would actually be injured by a junior. That attack from Yi Xian had almost destroyed his entire arm. But Yi Xian wasn't even at the Saint Realm. He was too monstrous. The old man's eyes gradually turned icy cold as he gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. In the distance, Yi Xian could feel the murderous intent of the purple-robed elder. He gripped the moke sword tightly in his right hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, he did not dare to be careless. One careless move could cost him his life. Right at this moment, the violet-robed old man suddenly vanished. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment, he took a stride forward, and then he held his sword with both hands before he suddenly slashed down from above. Bang! As his sword slashed down, Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force spread through his entire body, and then he was blasted flying. However, the purple-robed old man did not care about his arm that had been completely torn apart. He charged forward and punched Yi Xian, who was sent flying. If this punch landed, Yi Xian would definitely become a pile of mush. Chapter 490. Right when this fist was about to smash onto Yi Xian, a spear suddenly tore through the sky and arrived before him. Bang! The violet-robed old man retreated by over 30 m. The violet-robed old man raised his head to look over, and he saw a white-clothed woman that held a spear in her hand standing before Yi Xian. This person was precisely Xianxia. Xianxia held a spear in her hand as she just looked at the violet-robed old man without a trace of fear in her eyes. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Xianxia. "Who are you?" Xianxia didn't speak, and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth. "What are you doing here?" Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. "Am I not welcome?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course I am." Xianxia was just about to say something when the violet-robed old man suddenly roared furiously. "Die for the old man." As soon as his voice resounded, he pressed his left hand forward. With this press, an enormous energy palm suddenly flashed out from space, and it shot straight towards Yi Xian and Xianxia. Xianxia's wrist spun, and her spear stabbed out. This spear directly stabbed onto the enormous energy palm. However, the formidable force of the attack really did force Xianxia to retreat repeatedly. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed his sword at the enormous energy palm. Bang! The enormous energy palm exploded into pieces. However, Yi Xian's expression changed instead because the violet-robed old man had already appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Xianxia's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. "Retreat!" Yi Xian didn't hesitate to retreat, and he just retreated when a spear suddenly stabbed straight down towards the top of Yi Xian's head, and a strand of light flickered on the tip of the spear. The violet-robed old man's expression changed, and he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian, and he smashed out with his left fist. Bang! Xianxia retreated over 30 m with her spear, but at practically the exact same moment, 2 flying swords appeared before the violet-robed old man and slashed straight at his throat. The violet-robed old man's pupils constricted slightly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. However, he just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Soul Fixation Sword. Moreover, at this moment, Yi Xian was holding the soul suppressing sword in his hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, Yi Xian did not dare to use soul separation or soul fixation from a distance, because the other party was too strong, and he did not have the slightest confidence. Thus, he chose close combat. The purple-robed old man had nowhere to hide. At this moment, the violet-robed old man had obviously sensed the uniqueness of this strike of Yi Xian's, and his expression instantly changed drastically. At this moment he was utterly unable to dodge because this strike of Yi Xian's was too ingenious and had grasped the perfect timing. So, he could only choose to take it head-on. There was no other choice. The purple-robed old man roared angrily and punched out with his left hand. This punch could be said to contain the power of his entire life. The space in front of him directly collapsed. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom! Along with the sound of an explosion, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, at the instant he was sent flying, his sword struck the purple-robed old man's arm. At this instant, the violet-robed old man was horrified. He didn't hesitate to detonate his body resolutely while his soul floated backwards. As he floated several thousand feet away. And Xianxia was about to chase after them when the violet-robed elder suddenly roared, "Stop them!" 4 black-clothed men appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. And Xianxia did not attack again. Instead, she turned around and returned to Yi Xian's side. Fresh blood flowed endlessly from the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. And Xianxia lightly wiped the blood from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth, her expression gradually turning cold. Yi Xian stared into the distance. The purple-robed old man's soul was fading away, but a moment later, the purple-robed old man's soul began to fade. But after a short moment, the old man's soul returned to normal. He didn't die. Yi Xian's face sank. In the distance, the violet-robed old man raised his head to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, his eyes were filled with extreme fear. That sword strike from before had almost directly crushed him to death. If his soul wasn't sufficiently strong, he would have died already. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian for a short moment, and then he turned around and returned to the starry sky. At this moment, he didn't dare fight Yi Xian and Xianxia anymore. He was a soul body now, and Yi Xian's sword and sword techniques clearly countered soul bodies. If he were to continue attacking now, he would have a slim chance of survival. After returning to the starry sky, the violet-robed old man said furiously, "Attack! Everyone attack!" As soon as his voice resounded, countless experts swooped down from the boundless starry sky. A dense expanse of darkness. At this moment, the enforcers of order attacked with all their might, and they didn't hold back in the slightest. Below, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the dense expanse of darkness in the starry sky. His brows were knit together tightly, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Beside him, Xianxia said in a light voice, "Just do your best." Yi Xian nodded lightly, "Just do your best." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged into the sky with his sword in hand. Xianxia was behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian charged towards the group of saint-rank cavalrymen once more because Ague and the others were completely suppressed. If no one helped them, then Ague and the others would die. Along with the addition of Yi Xian and Xianxia, Ague and the others instantly felt much more at ease. Especially since Yi Xian's flying sword was helping them from the shadows, and it could be said to be a great help. Even these saint-rank cavalrymen were unable to resist Yi Xian's flying sword. That flying sword was too swift. It was swift to the point even saint-rank experts couldn't dodge it. Moreover, Xianxia's strength was extremely formidable as well, and she directly crushed saint-rank experts. Especially when Xianxia and Yi Xian cooperated together, they could practically instantly annihilate any saint-rank expert. For a time, Ague and the others started to gradually gain the upper hand. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian and Xianxia below. His gaze was like a sword, and it flickered with ghastly killing intent. Right at this moment, Yi Xian, who was killing, suddenly turned his head, and in the next moment, he directly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light directly severed the head of an expert. And in front of this expert, a young man slowly fell from the sky. This person was War Army. At this moment, War Army only had one arm left. Yi Xian supported War Army. War Army's entire body was covered in scars, and his aura was growing weaker. When he saw Yi Xian, War Army grinned, and this grin instantly caused a copious amount of blood to gush out from his mouth. Yi Xian gently placed War Army on the ground. War Army looked up at the end of the horizon and softly said, "Brother Yi, I might have to leave first." Yi Xian shook his head. "There's still hope." With that said, he took out a pile of purple source crystals and placed them in War Army's arms. War Army gently shook his head. "The current me no longer has any combat strength. If I live, I will only be a burden to my brothers. To me, death is a kind of release." Yi Xian said angrily, "What the F***ck are you saying? What do you mean by you will only be a burden to your brothers if you live?" War Army softly said, "Brother Yi, let me die." He naturally wanted to live, but at this moment, he was very clear that he would only be a burden to others if he lived. Because the current him no longer had any combat strength, and if these brothers around him came to protect him, they would be implicated by him. He wanted to live, but he didn't want to implicate these brothers around him even more. Yi Xian gently placing War Army on the ground, he held War Army's shoulders tightly with both hands. "Listen, live well, live for me." With that said, he suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. In front of him, an expert was directly cut in half by his sword, but soon, more and more experts rushed towards him and War Army. Looking at those experts rushing over, Yi Xian's expression gradually became ferocious. When those people rushed in front of him, he suddenly waved his hands. Buzz! 2 swords suddenly rang out, and then 2 swords suddenly flew out. For a moment in front of Yi Xian, dozens of people's heads almost moved at the same time. But the next moment, more people rushed over. War Army looked at Yi Xian with a somewhat complicated expression. "Brother Yi," Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, "Shut up, hurry up and heal your wounds." With that said, he held his sword and slashed diagonally. A sword aura shot out, and in an instant, dozens of people on the right were directly killed. However, more and more experts appeared in the sky, and at that moment, whether it was the Moke clan or the never-ending Starfield, more and more people were dying. Never-ending Starfield's Moke clan was completely suppressed. At that moment, in the void in the sky, Moke clan's Mo suddenly turned around. Not far away, Zhuqing's chest was pierced by a sword, and one of the foreign experts slashed at Zhuqing's head. Zhuqing slowly closed his eyes. He was already exhausted. This was not a one-on-one fight. He had killed at least hundreds of experts by himself, and at that moment he was really exhausted. Seeing Zhuqing's situation, Mo's expression changed drastically. He was about to help, but at that moment, dozens of experts directly surrounded him. Mo's expression instantly became ferocious. He pointed a finger at his chest, and a powerful aura swept out from his body. Rumble! The surrounding experts all retreated from the impact. Mo's looked at Zhuqing's position. Zhuqing's head did not fly off, but was slowly dragged down by a sword. Mo's turned his head to the right, where Yi Xian was. At that moment, Yi Xian was facing off against almost 100 experts by himself. Mo's looked at the falling Zhuqing. Zhuqing glanced at Mo's and smiled slightly. "I'll go first." With that, he looked at the countless experts rushing towards him. Clan, fight to the death. With that, he placed his palm on his abdomen. Mo's expression changed drastically. He rushed towards Zhuqing, but a powerful force suddenly exploded from Zhuqing's body. Almost in an instant, almost 100 experts around him were directly turned into ashes. Seeing this scene, Mo's was stunned. On the other side, Yi Xian was also stunned. After a moment of silence, Mo's suddenly looked up at the sky. The next moment, he clenched his fists and smashed them in front of him. Rumble! With Xie as the center, the space within a few hundred meters suddenly shook violently and cracked. Powerful dark energy surged out from the surroundings. In an instant, countless screams rang out from the surroundings. Xie raised his head and roared, "All members of the Moke clan, listen to my order. Kill at all costs." With that he rushed into the sky. Wherever he passed, heads flew out one after another. On the other side, Xian turned his head to look at War Army. War Army's right hand slowly clenched. Xian said angrily, "Don't do stupid things." War Army said softly, "I don't want to drag you down." With that, he slammed his palm towards his abdomen. At the same time, a powerful force was gathering in his abdomen. Chapter 491. Self-Destruct. Seeing this scene, Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly slashed with his sword. A wave of sword gleams surged out, and the dozen people in front of Xian were directly killed by this sword gleam. Meanwhile, Xian turned and rushed toward the War Army. The War Army looked at Xian in front of him and grinned. "Brother, take care." With that said, he slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, a hand suddenly pressed down on the War Army's shoulder. In an instant, the powerful force in the War Army's body was directly suppressed. The War Army opened his eyes. In front of him stood a black-robed man, and behind this black-robed man were 9 men in black robes. These 9 people's faces could not be seen clearly. The War Army was a little puzzled. "You are?" The reason why he was puzzled was because he had never seen these people before. The black-robed man did not answer the War Army. He turned to look at Xian, and at that moment, Xian was already in front of him. Xian looked at the black-robed man. "You are?" The black-robed man said, "Young Master Yi, we are here to help you. As for anything else, we can't tell you for the time being." Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Thank you very much." The black-robed man looked up at the void in the sky and said softly, "Young Master Yi, are you willing to leave with us?" Xian frowned slightly. "Leave?" The black-robed man nodded. "Young Master Yi, to be honest, this time, the Keeper of Order is serious. With the current strength of the Moke clan and the never-ending Star Sector, it is impossible to stop them." As he said that, he looked at Xian. "You will only die in vain if you stay here." Xian turned to look at the sky, which was filled with a dense army. It could be said that the defeat of the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan was only a matter of time. Xian said softly, "I, Xian, appreciate everyone's good intentions." The black-robed man said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, you have no chance of winning." Xian said, "It's precisely because there's no chance of winning that I can't leave." As he spoke, he looked towards the sky and said in a light voice, "If others don't betray me, I won't betray them." The black-robed man sighed softly. In fact, he had already expected this. Xian looked at the black-robed man and said, "Everyone, I don't know who you are, but please don't get involved in this matter." The black-robed man smiled and said, "We came here to help." With that, he waved his right hand. Behind the black-robed man, 9 people suddenly soared into the sky. 9 Sage Peak experts. Moreover, they weren't ordinary Sage Peak experts. They were very strong. Xian looked at the black-robed man, and the black-robed man smiled and said, "I know young Master Yi has questions. If we win, I will tell young Master Yi. If we lose, everything will be meaningless." Xian nodded and said, "No matter what, thank you." The black-robed man said, "Let's talk later." With that, he turned and soared into the sky, directly rushing towards a rebirth realm expert. Xian turned and looked at the War Army. War Army was about to speak when Xian suddenly grabbed him and brought him into the Great Wall of Burial Skies. Xian placed the War Army on the ground and said, "Heal well. If we all die before you recover, you can self-destruct. If we don't die, then come out and help." With that, he turned and disappeared not far away. In the same place, the War Army was silent for a moment before he began to devour purple origin crystals. What he needed to do now was to quickly heal. Outside the great wall of burial skies, Yixian stood in the sky. At this moment, there were screams everywhere in the starry sky. People were dying at every moment. Although the black-robed man and the others had joined in, it was not very useful. At this time, a certain part of space suddenly exploded. A woman walked out. This person was precisely Master Painter. When he saw the painter, the purple-robed old man's face instantly darkened. The painter looked up at the starry sky and finally, her gaze landed on the purple-robed old man. The latter's expression instantly changed. At this moment, the painter suddenly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in the starry sky. The purple-robed old man was shocked. "Stop her." Dozens of experts directly rushed towards the painter. However, in less than a breath's time, these dozens of people had their heads removed. At the same time, the painter had already appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. Just as the painter was about to attack, an afterimage suddenly swept towards her. The painter frowned and raised her hand to press down. Boom! A wave of energy suddenly erupted from the painter's palm, but it was quickly extinguished. The painter was forced back nearly 100 steps. And at this time, in front of the purple-robed old man stood a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man wore a black overcoat and had a sheathed saber at his waist. The painter looked at the middle-aged man. The latter's right hand grasped the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he suddenly drew the saber. A saber light erupted from the sheath, as dazzling as the sun. In the distance, the painter's jade-like hand gently pressed forward. The space in front of her palm began to rapidly condense. At this time, the saber light arrived. Bang! The space in front of the painter began to violently tremble. Then cracks began to appear. In less than a breath of time, the space for 10,000 feet around the painter had cracked into a spiderweb. The painter's right hand suddenly clenched into a fist. She lightly pressed forward, "Break." As her words fell, bang! The space in front of the painter began to collapse inch by inch. A formidable strength spread out like a tsunami towards the blade-wielding man. Across from the painter, the blade-wielding man was expressionless. His eyes were closed, his right hand gripping the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he stepped forward, his right hand drawing the saber and slashing down. His movements were completed in a single breath. A wisp of saber aura tore through the air. Wherever the saber aura passed, it tore through everything. Even the painter's strength was torn apart. The space in front of the two was like a piece of cloth, while the saber aura was like a sharp scissor. Soon, the saber aura tore through the space and arrived in front of the painter. The painter's hands came together. This closed in on the saber aura. After a moment of silence, the painter suddenly pressed down. The saber aura instantly disappeared. However, at this moment, a saber slashed down from the painter's head. The painter suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the two began to fight. Both sides could be said to be evenly matched. Below, Yixian looked up at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was also looking at him. The purple-robed elder did not attack. All he had to do now was wait because they already had the upper hand. It was only a matter of time before the Moke clan and Never-Ending Star region were defeated. Yixian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at the distant Xianxia. At this moment, Xianxia was crazily slaughtering. Suddenly Yixian said, "Xianxia, help me. I'll kill that old bastard." After saying that, he transformed into a sword aura and soared into the sky. 1,000 feet away, Xianxia, who was in the midst of a massacre, turned his head to look at Yixian's position. In the next moment, his body trembled, and he directly turned into a black shadow that chased after Yixian. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived beside Yixian. Yixian said, "Help me stop the others." Xianxia did not speak. He only stared at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. In the starry sky, seeing Yixian and Xianxia rush over, the purple-robed elder's expression instantly changed. He knew how terrifying Yixian and Xianxia were. Although they were both young, They were monstrous among monstrous geniuses. If the two of them worked together, killing a creation realm expert would be a very simple matter. The purple-robed elder hastily shouted, "Stop them! Stop them for me!" As soon as he finished speaking, countless strong people around dashed towards Yixian and Xianxia. More than a dozen of them were killed by the two flying swords before they could even get close to Yixian and Xianxia. When the rest of the people came into contact with Yixian and Xianxia's speed suddenly exploded. He directly rushed into the crowd and punched forward with both fists. Rumble! In the starry sky, an explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. More than a dozen experts were crushed on the spot. Meanwhile, Yixian relied on the two flying swords to forcefully rush in front of the purple-robed elder. However, at this moment, the purple-robed elder's mouth suddenly curled up. His smile was a little strange. Sensing this scene, Yixian's expression changed greatly. At this moment, he could no longer hold back. He suddenly slashed down with his sword. The sword was the soul-suppressing sword. If this sword fell, at such a close distance, the purple-robed elder would definitely die. This was because the purple-robed elder was currently a soul body. Just as Yixian's sword was about to fall, a blurry shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yixian. In the next moment, Yixian felt an aura of death. However, Yixian's expression was incomparably calm. That sword still fell down. Meanwhile, the blurry shadow retreated dozens of feet because a demonic beast had appeared beside Yixian. Second floor Great God. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that the shadow would suddenly retreat. Even if he wanted to retreat now, it was too late. Yixian's sword slashed down. The purple-robed elder's soul instantly became illusory. Behind the purple-robed elder, Yixian coldly said, "I'll let you laugh." As his voice fell, he slashed back with his sword. The purple-robed elder's soul instantly began to dissipate. In front of Yixian, the shadow stared at the second-floor Great God behind Yixian. "I think you must be the mysterious expert behind Yixian. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chapter 492. The Second-Floor Guru. Yixian did not expect the second-floor guru to appear. Fortunately, the second-floor guru suddenly appeared. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble just now because the middle-aged man in front of him was far stronger than him, Yixian. The middle-aged man did not care about Yixian at this moment, but stared at the second-floor guru. In his opinion, the second-floor guru in front of him was the most dangerous person. The second-floor guru glanced around in silence. At this moment, 3 old men appeared around her. Yixian returned to the second-floor guru's side. The second-floor guru looked at the middle-aged man opposite her, who smiled and said, "How should I address you?" The second-floor guru suddenly disappeared. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression changed dramatically. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the middle-aged man was sent flying thousands of feet away. However, at this moment, the 3 old men around the second-floor guru suddenly disappeared. The second-floor guru slapped out. Boom! With the second-floor guru as the center, the space within thousands of feet collapsed and was annihilated in an instant. In an instant, the space returned to normal, and the 3 old men had disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yixian was dumbfounded. He knew that the second-floor guru was strong, but he did not expect her to be this strong. That was an instant kill. As for the 3 experts just now, they were all creation realm experts, but they were instantly killed just like that. In the distance, the middle-aged man also had a solemn expression. Obviously, the second-floor guru's strength was beyond his expectations. The second-floor guru slowly walked toward the middle-aged man. "Such a weak person, how dare you covet this treasure? Don't you have any idea in your heart?" As her voice fell, she suddenly disappeared. Then, the space in front of the middle-aged man collapsed inch by inch. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man's pupils shrank slightly. The next moment he suddenly stomped his right foot, and his whole body shot out. Boom! Not far in front of Yixian, a loud noise suddenly rang out, and the surrounding space trembled. Then Yixian saw a figure in the starry sky retreating rapidly. It was the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man retreated nearly thousands of feet away. Not only that, but one of his arms had disappeared. The middle-aged man raised his head to look at the god on the second floor. Just as he was about to speak, the god on the second floor suddenly disappeared. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank, and in the next moment, before he could react, his head was sent flying. At this time, second floor god appeared behind the middle-aged man. At the side, Yixian was stunned. The strength of this second floor guru. The great god on the second floor raised his head and looked into the depths of the starry sky. There, a voice suddenly sounded, "How should I address you?" As the voice faded, an old man appeared in front of the Almighty on the second floor. The old man wore a long robe embroidered with gold. His beard was very long, reaching his chest. The old man glanced at Yixian, then his eyes fell on the great god on the second floor. The old man basically knows all the experts in this star field, but I've never seen or heard of you. The great god on the second floor did not speak. She suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the old man expressionlessly pointed a finger. Rumble. The surrounding space trembled, and the great god on the second floor returned to her original position, but the next moment, she suddenly disappeared. With a tearing sound, the old man retreated hundreds of feet away. In front of the old man, the great god on the second floor slammed her claw down. This claw slashed down, and the space was directly torn and shattered like paper. In front of the great god on the second floor, the old man suddenly clenched his right hand. Retreat. Voice. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. As he fell, a black vortex suddenly appeared in front of him. Boom. After the great god on the second floor's claw fell, she instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. At this time, the old man suddenly took a step forward, and a powerful force instantly enveloped the great god on the second floor, but the next moment, this force directly collapsed. Soon, the great god on the second floor appeared in front of the old man, and at the same time, a tearing sound suddenly rang. Rumble. With this deafening vibration, the old man had retreated hundreds of feet away, and as soon as he stopped, two flying swords suddenly appeared in front of him. These two swords were extremely fast, and the timing was even more perfect. However, as soon as the two flying swords appeared in front of the old man, they disappeared without a sound. In the distance, Yixian saw this scene, and his face immediately darkened. The old man looked at Yixian. Among the younger generation, you are indeed not bad. As he spoke, he looked at the great god on the second floor. Your strength also surprised the old man, but if you want to protect the never-ending galaxy, the Moke clan, and this Yixian, I'm afraid that is not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly waved his right hand. With this, the space around the great god on the second floor suddenly undulated like a wave. The great god on the second floor looked at Yixian. Retreat. Without the slightest hesitation, Yixian immediately retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as he retreated, the space around the great god on the second floor shattered, and then a powerful force came from the starry sky. At this time, Yixian suddenly turned his head, and there, a figure slowly walked over. This person was Wei Yangtian, and in Wei Yangtian's hand was a bloody head. This head was the celestial venerable's head. We won. Yixian's heart relaxed. Wei Yangtian walked to Yixian's side and looked at the distant great god on the second floor. Your friend? Yixian nodded. Wei Yangtian looked at Yixian. Do you still have friends like this? Call more of them. Yixian. Wei Yangtian looked up into the distant starry sky, and gradually her brows furrowed. Yixian said in a low voice, There are others? Wei Yangtian nodded. Yixian looked into the starry sky. What are they waiting for? Wei Yangtendo said, They probably won't wait any longer. As soon as Wei Yangtian finished speaking, she walked into the starry sky. As if remembering something, she turned to look at Yixian. You are now the master of the never-ending galaxy. As soon as she finished speaking, she flashed towards the starry sky. Yi Xian knew that Wei Yang Tian had taken the initiative to look for the experts in the dark. A short moment later, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and transformed into a ray of light that shot down. It didn't take long for two flying swords to flash past incessantly. Instant kill. Yi Xian's two flying swords were so swift that even Sage Realm experts couldn't resist them. Yi Xian, Wuxia, and Xianxia could be said to be unstoppable. After the three of them joined forces, the situation actually turned around slightly. Especially Yi Xian's flying swords. They could be said to be specialized in killing the top experts, and these people were utterly unable to resist them. Yi Xian's group of three understood that Wei Yang Tian and the second floor's experts were busy, so they had to kill them as quickly as possible. The more they killed, the better. Just like this, under the combined efforts of Yi Xian, Wuxia, and Xianxia, the battle situation gradually turned around. This was because the mercenaries and Saint Realm Knights were already fighting while retreating. They weren't afraid of people like Wuxia and Xianxia who fought head-on, but they were afraid of people like Yi Xian who attacked from the shadows. However, due to the huge difference in numbers, the never-ending Star Zone and the Moke clan were still suppressed. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Right at this moment, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded from the depths of the distant starry sky. Yi Xian looked up and saw a figure rapidly retreating in the starry sky, directly retreating to the sky above the Great Wall of Heaven Burial. This person was none other than Endless Heaven. Everyone's faces turned solemn when they saw this. In the starry sky, a huge human face quietly appeared. This face looked down, and in the next moment, a powerful force suddenly exploded in the starry sky. Rumble. The entire starry sky suddenly trembled violently as if it was on the verge of collapsing. Right at this moment, Master Painter, the great god on the second floor, and the hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan retreated repeatedly, and they retreated by almost 3 kilometers. On the other hand, the experts from the foreign territories and Sky River region had stopped fighting and retreated into the starry sky as well. The huge face looked down, and then its gaze stopped on the great god on the second floor in the end. A clone! The clone! The gazes of everyone in the surroundings shot towards the god on the second floor when they heard this, and their eyes carried a trace of shock. Even Yi Xian was slightly shocked at this moment. He hadn't expected that the great god on the second floor was actually just a clone. The great god on the second floor gazed at the huge face in the starry sky. Is there a problem? The face vanished silently and was replaced by an illusory middle-aged man. Countless people hurriedly bowed deeply to him when they saw this illusory middle-aged man. The Star Lord, the master of countless stellar regions and the master of the guardians of the starry sky. The Star Lord gazed at the great god on the second floor, and then he pressed his fingers together and pointed down. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. After a moment of silence, the great god on the second floor's figure instantly became illusory, and then she started to dissipate bit by bit. The great god on the second floor gazed at the Star Lord silently. Just like that, she gradually vanished until she vanished. Meanwhile, the Star Lord gazed at Wei Yang Tian, Master Painter, and the others. Wei Yang Tian's face was expressionless, and he didn't show any weakness as he met the Star Lord's gaze. The Star Lord spoke softly, "All of you aren't bad. Are you willing to follow me?" Follow. A wisp of ridicule curled up on the corners of Wei Yang Tian's mouth when he heard the Star Lord, "Follow you?" The Star Lord shook his head. "Following me might be an opportunity for the three of you, an opportunity to rise to a higher level." Wei Yang Tian looked the Star Lord in the eyes. "I'm sorry, but I don't have the habit of being someone's dog." The Star Lord nodded slightly. "I won't force it." As he spoke, he pressed his right hand down lightly. A powerful force smashed down towards Wei Yang Tian and the others. Others couldn't sense this force, but only Wei Yang Tian and the others could. When they felt this powerful force, Wei Yang Tian and the others' expressions changed. What a terrifying force! Soon, the three of them were directly pressed down by this force, and before long, the ground below started to crumble and be annihilated inch by inch. In the starry sky, the middle-aged man's gaze landed on Yi Xian. He pressed his right hand down lightly, and with this pressure, Yixian's body was directly fixed in place. In the next moment, an illusory Xiao Ta quietly appeared between his brows. Yixian's entire body instantly stiffened. The other party wanted to forcibly pull out the prison pagoda. Yixian felt his divine soul disappearing bit by bit, and his consciousness was also gradually blurring. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from within Yixian's body. "Sorry, this is mine." As the voice faded, boom. The prison pagoda between Yixian's brows instantly returned to Yixian's body, and at the same time, footsteps sounded from the 5th floor. End of this chapter. Chapter 493. The 5th floor. Yixian's eyelids twitched. Is this guy coming out? In the field, everyone's eyes fell on Yixian. The Star Lord in the air also looked at Yixian and said softly, "It seems that you still have a backup plan." Yixian sneered, "I advise you to quickly kneel down and beg for mercy. Otherwise, you will die without a burial place." The Star Lord shook his head and chuckled, "Die without a burial place? You've made the biggest joke in the history of this star field." As he said, he looked at Yixian's abdomen. "Let him come out." Come out. Everyone was looking at Yixian. Under everyone's gaze, an illusory Xiaota suddenly appeared between Yixian's eyebrows. As this illusory Xiaota appeared, a man walked out from it. The man looked like he was only in his 30s. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and there was a small, emperor character between his eyebrows. His sleeves were very wide and his hands were hidden in the sleeves. His feet were bare and locked with a black shackle. Everyone was looking at the man. The great god on the 2nd floor who appeared beside Yixian also looked at Yixian. Her eyes were solemn, extremely solemn. The man looked up at the starry sky. He closed his eyes slightly and said greedily, "Fresh air, it turns out to be so wonderful. Sure enough, things that have not been lost will never be cherished." In the starry sky, the Star Lord looked down at the man. "Who are you?" The man opened his eyes and looked at the Star Lord. He smiled and said, "Who?" As he said this, the smile on his face gradually widened. In the end, he laughed out loud, but there was a trace of desolation in his laughter. Yixian looked at the laughing man in the distance and asked the great god on the 2nd floor softly, "Is he very powerful?" The great god on the 2nd floor said softly, "Do you see the shackles on his feet? That was done by this pagoda in the past. To be able to make this broken pagoda do this, it already proves how powerful he is." Yixian nodded slightly. Now, he hoped that the man and the Star Lord would both be injured. To him, this was undoubtedly the best thing that could happen. The man in front of him and the Star Lord were too strong. In the distance, the man slowly walked towards the starry sky. "You're asking who I am? Let me tell you, I am Di Xing Emperor." The Star Lord frowned. "Never heard of it." Di Xing laughed. "You are so weak, how could you have heard of it?" In the starry skies, the Star Lord narrowed his eyes. "You are the most arrogant person this Lord has ever seen. I hope your strength is worthy of your arrogance." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pointed down with his finger, and then a strand of cold light shot down violently from the starry sky. This strand of cold light was like a shooting star, and it was soundless and didn't emanate any energy fluctuations. The expressions of Wei Yangtian and the others turned solemn when they saw the cold light. Even the great god on the 2nd floor had a hint of surprise in his eyes. Surpassing heaven and earth, Yixian hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" The great god on the 2nd floor said in a deep voice, "This Star Lord has already touched the threshold of Dao. His strength has surpassed this world, and all the restrictions of this world are ineffective against him. Under such circumstances, to the people of this world, he is like a god, because he is outside the laws and isn't restricted by any laws of this world." Yixian looked up at Xing Emperor in the starry sky. At this moment, the strand of cold light had already reached the top of Xing Emperor's head. Under everyone's gaze, Xing Emperor gently waved his right hand. With this wave, that strand of cold light was like a cloud of green smoke, drifting away with the wind. Seeing this scene, the Star Lord in the starry sky narrowed his eyes, and there was an additional trace of seriousness in the depths of his eyes. When an expert made a move, it was obvious whether or not there was an expert. He knew that he had underestimated Xing Emperor in front of him. Below, Xing Emperor, this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. He looked up at the Star Lord and shook his head, really low level. As soon as he finished speaking, he gently stomped his right foot. It was extremely calm. But in the next moment, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. Because the figures of countless people in the starry sky had suddenly started to turn illusory. It could be said that besides the Star Lord, the figures of everyone by his side had started to turn illusory as well. Everyone here was dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene, including the Star Lord. In next to no time, countless shrill cries resounded while many experts fled madly towards the depths of the starry sky. A few breaths of time later, the starry sky had become empty, and only the Star Lord remained. Meanwhile, Xing Emperor had arrived in front of the Star Lord. The Star Lord stared fixedly at Xing Emperor. "Who exactly are you?" Xing Emperor smiled. "A person that's been forgotten by history." The Star Lord took a step forward, and then he clawed at Xing Emperor from afar. This clawing motion caused the space around Xing Emperor to collapse and be obliterated at an extremely swift speed. Everyone watched as the space around the exalted Emperor began to burn. Just like that, it continued for an unknown period of time before the ball of flames gradually dispersed, and Xing Emperor was still completely unharmed. The Star Lord's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene. Impossible. Xing Emperor's eyes closed slowly. "Weak? You're too weak." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and spoke softly. "This stellar region is too weak. Too weak." The Star Lord stared fixedly at Xing Emperor. "Who exactly are you?" Xing Emperor smiled. "Xing Emperor." The Star Lord spoke fiercely. "I've never heard of you." Xing Emperor chuckled. "Then die." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly vanished. But in the next moment, he'd returned to where he stood just a moment ago. But at this moment, he held a bloody head in his hand. It was the Star Lord's head. Everyone here was stunned. He was instantly killed just like that? Yi Xian was stunned as well. How could such a formidable Star Lord be instantly killed just like that? The god on the second floor who stood by Yi Xian's side spoke softly. "Do you understand now? The experts in the outside world aren't on the same level as the experts in here." Yi Xian was speechless. Xing Emperor glanced at the head in his hand, shook his head, and then squeezed it lightly. Bang! The head transformed into nothingness. Xing Emperor looked towards the depths of the starry sky. "Is my main body coming over?" Main body? This Star Lord wasn't his main body, but a clone. There was no response from the depths of the distant starry sky. Xing Emperor shook his head. "It's boring." As he spoke, he turned around to look at Yi Xian and the others. To be more precise, his gaze had descended onto Yi Xian. In an instant, Xing Emperor appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent. Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. "This pagoda has trapped me for 67,000 years. 67,000 years. Do you know how it feels?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "It's quite uncomfortable. However, it doesn't seem to have much to do with me, right?" Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. "You're the pagoda master." Yi Xian said, "I'm not the one who trapped you here. If you want to take revenge, then you should look for the original owner of this pagoda." Xing Emperor shook his head. "I can't defeat him." Yi Xian was speechless. Xing Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. "This emperor doesn't want to waste time. I just want to ask, is the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda here? The owner of the pagoda?" Yi Xian fell silent. The plain-dressed woman was here? He didn't know either. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. If the plain-dressed woman didn't appear, then he would be dead for sure. At the thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly activated the World Prison Pagoda. However, the moment the World Prison Pagoda appeared, it returned to his body. Yi Xian looked at Xing Emperor. Xing Emperor shook his head. You want to risk your life? No, you're too weak. That's not right either. I should say that you're too young. As his voice fell, his right hand gently pressed down on Yi Xian. With this pressure, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. At this moment, he truly felt the aura of death. He felt that his body was about to shatter. At this moment, Great God on the second floor pulled Yi Xian behind her. She clawed at Xing Emperor. Xing Emperor shook his head and casually waved. Boom! Great God on the second floor instantly flew out. Wherever she passed, the space was annihilated and turned pitch black. Moreover, the laws of this world couldn't repair the space. Xing Emperor's hand fell toward Yi Xian. Unending sky suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xing Emperor shook his head. And, as his voice fell, he blasted out a punch. Unending sky's expression changed drastically. Her arms suddenly blocked in front of her. Boom! Unending sky was instantly sent flying. Thousands of feet away, unending sky had just stopped when her arms shattered into nothingness. Xing Emperor glanced at unending sky and said softly, You can barely survive my attack. Unfortunately, in this emperor's eyes, you're still an ant. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Originally, I wanted to wait for the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda. But now, it seems that he won't appear. As he said this, he shook his head. Unfortunately, it's a little less fun. After saying this, he glanced at everyone in front of him and said softly, You guys are really weak. This is the first day I come out. I'll use you guys as a sacrifice to the heavens. As he said this, he waved his hands. In an instant, the entire never-ending starfield began to tremble violently. Countless places began to shatter inch by inch. He was going to destroy the entire never-ending starfield. Seeing this scene, the painter's expression changed. Her figure trembled as she charged toward Xing Emperor. However, before she could get close to him, she was sent flying by a powerful force. Even the hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan was the same. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed in front of Xing Emperor. Soul-suppressing sword. One sword soul-suppressing sword. As the sword fell, Xing Emperor suddenly stopped. However, he was completely fine because he had caught the soul-suppressing sword between two fingers. Yi Xian's face was filled with disbelief. Your soul? Xing Emperor said softly. The sword is barely passable. The sword technique is not bad. Unfortunately, you're too weak. This emperor's soul has long been immortal. How can a mere broken sword split it? As he said this, his fingers trembled slightly. Boom! The soul-suppressing sword suddenly collapsed, turning into countless fragments that slowly fell from the sky. At this moment, a weak voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young Lord, actually you're not bad. Little soul doesn't regret following Young Lord. Take care. Yi Xian was petrified on the spot. Xing Emperor chuckled. Are you in despair? This emperor likes to see your expressions of despair. As he said this, he was about to attack, but at this moment, buzz. A sword suddenly rang out from within Yi Xian's body. A sword suddenly flew out from the top of the tower. The sword soared into the sky and entered the starry sky. Then, it landed steadily in a hand. Everyone looked up into the sky. There stood a swordsman in a cloud-white robe. Xing Emperor turned to look at swordsman and chuckled. Are you here? I hope you're not too weak. P.S. I want a prostitute. Ticket. Seeking a prostitute. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.